Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this special board meeting of the Medical Board of California. Pursuant to the provisions of Governor Gavin Newsom's Executive Order N29-20, dated March 17, 2020, this meeting is being conducted via WebEx. Public comments will be heard for the agenda item for individuals wishing to do so. In order to be ready for public comment, we ask that you please ensure that your comments can be heard clearly by connecting to the audio of this meeting through the proper method. If you're having difficulty hearing the audio of this meeting, it could be because the device you are connecting with has bandwidth limitations. If you do have difficulty hearing the audio of this meeting using your device's audio, please click the ellipsis button at the bottom of the WebEx application or the communicate menu at the top of the WebEx application, and then select audio connection. You will see an option to call in and will be provided with a telephone number, access codes, and attendee ID that can be used to connect to the meeting via phone. Using the information provided, it will automatically disconnect your device's audio and connect your phone to the name you joined the meeting with. By using this method, if you are having audio problems with your device, this will still allow you to participate and hear the audio of this board meeting. Please see the instructions on how to connect link on the last page of the meeting agenda for step-by-step instructions, including screenshots. Thank you, Ms. Lawson. You can now start the meeting.
Thank you, Sean, and good afternoon, board members and members of the public who are joining us. Thank you for joining for this special board meeting. I'd like to ask all of you to turn any devices that you have to silent. Since this meeting is being conducted via WebEx, I will ask all board members and speakers to please announce themselves before speaking for clarity of the official record. All board members are able to unmute themselves to speak during the meeting, and please do place yourselves back on mute when you're not speaking in order to reduce the background noise and prevent any feedback for all participants. Following this online meeting etiquette will ensure the best audio quality for everyone. During each call for comments from board members and speakers, we will ensure that all comments that can be accommodated are heard before proceeding with the agenda. Government Code 11126.5 does allow a board to remove people who willfully interrupt a meeting and to clear the room or virtual space if order cannot be restored by removing or muting the disruptive people. The board welcomes comments on any item on the agenda, and it is the board's intent to ask for public comments prior to the board taking action on each agenda item. During each agenda item, the host moderating this WebEx event will activate the Q&A feature of WebEx and will ask anyone wishing to make a public comment to indicate so by replying yes. The host will then call on individuals who indicated they wish to make public comments by name. When called upon, the host will unmute the microphone of the individual and they will have 3 minutes to make their public comment. The host will audibly announce when 15 seconds remains to conclude the public comment. After the 3 minutes have lapsed, the individual will be placed back on mute. And there was only one public comment allowed per agenda item per attendee. As Sean mentioned, please do see page 2 of the agenda for WebEx instructions on how to connect from the link on the agenda and additional instructions. During public comment on agenda items, 20 minutes will be allowed for each public comment period. After 20 minutes, no further comments will be accepted. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes per agenda item. The board's IT staff will assist me with receiving the public comments via WebEx during this meeting. I would like to remind all speakers to please stay on topic and keep your comments to the allotted time or less. Today's meeting will be run according to the Open Meeting Act as required by law, and we do plan to end the meeting today by 6 p.m. I would like to now officially call the meeting to order at 3:35 p.m. and ask that board members unmute their computers for the roll call. Ms. Caldwell, please call the roll.
Mr. Brooks.
Here.
Ms. Campaverde.
Present.
Dr. Gonadev.
Here.
Dr. Hawkins.
Here.
Dr. Kraus.
Present.
Ms. Lawson. Ms. Lawson.
Here. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Dr. Lewis.
Present.
Ms. Lubiano.
Here.
Dr. Mahmood. Mr. Ryu.
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Thorpe.
Here.
Mr. Watkins.
Present.
Dr. Yip.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. A quorum is present. Board members, please mute your computers. And at this point, I would like to ask Ms. Webb to please, I think as we all recall at the last meeting, we said a warm goodbye to our colleagues on the board, Dr. Kraus and Dr. Lewis, who are joining us today. Ms. Webb, I just wanted to make sure we provided an explanation as to why they're here, notwithstanding that we said goodbye at the last meeting.
Sure. Government Code Section 1774 provides for a grace period of 60 days following the expiration of a term.
Thanks, Ms. Webb, and Dr. Kraus and Dr. Lewis. It's nice to have you here with us this afternoon. I would like to remind the members again that we'll be taking a roll call vote on all action items. We'll now move on to agenda item 2, discussion and possible action on findings to hold a special meeting. So Government Code Section 11125.4A2 allows the board to hold a special meeting with only 48 hours notice to consider proposed legislation when compliance with the 10-day notice provisions of Section 11125 would impose a substantial hardship on the board. The substantial hardship prompting the board to call this special meeting is that the board's sunset bill, SB 806, was significantly amended to include language that the board has not taken a position on. By holding a special meeting, the board seeks to discuss SB 806 and take a position on it before the Senate votes on the bill, which must occur by June 4th. In order to proceed with the special meeting, however, at least 2/3 of the board must agree that these circumstances pose a hardship justifying a special meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the findings to hold a special meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Dr. Lewis and a second from Dr. Kraus. Are there any questions or comments from the board members? All right, hearing none, I'll now ask the host to call for public comments.
Okay, and I've gone ahead and activated the Q&A window. If anyone would like to make a public comment, please just type yes into that box, or we can also utilize the raise hand feature if you'd like to do that today as well. Let's see, first up here we have Mario Guzman. Mario, are you there?
And just a reminder, this is on not on SB 806 itself. It's just on the findings of necessity to hold a special meeting.
And are we doing any particular time limits during this part?
3 minutes.
Okay, so I'll be keeping time, and I'll give everyone a 30-second notice when they're about to run out of time. So yes, first up we have Mario Guzman. Mario, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
My comments are regarding this Senate Bill 806 concerning the proposed changes to reduce the number of the public members by 2 and reducing the fees from 1150 to 863.
This is for the next agenda item, it sounds like.
Oh, okay, that's for, okay, I'll wait for them there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up we have Ludmila Parada. Ludmila, are you there?
Yes, I was calling. Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Is it
No,
for the
I
next-
think. Yes, I think it's related again to SB 806. So I will wait until public comment is open for that topic.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, those were the only 2 I saw in queue, so we'll have everyone hold over till the next one.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to the board for action on this item. Members, please unmute your computers. Is there any further comments from board members on the findings to hold the special meeting? All right, Ms. Caldwell, if you could please perform the roll call vote.
Mr. Brooks,
Yes.
Ms. Campaverde,
Aye.
Dr. Gonadev,
Aye.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Dr. Kraus,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Dr. Lewis,
Aye.
Ms. Lubiano.
Yes.
Do we have Dr. Mahmood? Mr. Ryu,
Aye.
Dr. Thorpe,
Aye.
Mr. Watkins,
Aye.
Dr. Yip.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. The findings to hold a special meeting have been approved. And if the members could please remute your computers. We will move on to agenda item 3, which is discussion and possible action on SB 806. And before we go to Mr. Bone for a report on SB 806, I just wanted to talk about how we're going to go about commenting and analyzing and ultimately potentially adopting a proposed position on SB 806. Mr. Bone's going to give his staff report. We're going to ask members if they have any clarifying questions of that report, and then we're going to go to public comments. And then I'm going to try by theme or by issue to group a set of issues for us to then have a conversation about. Those issues are likely to be the same set that are included in the staff report, although they may be different if different themes arise during the public comment portion. Then, at the end of that list, I'll also include time for anything I missed, but we're going to try to talk through each of those issues one by one, so we have a methodical way of getting through what is a complex bill and a complex set of issues. And like I said, at the end, we'll have a catch-all to the extent I either missed something or there's something you're interested in as a board member that wasn't raised during the public comment period. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Bone, for a report on where we're at with SB 806.
Thank you, Madam President. For clarity, I'm going to follow the same order that is included within the analysis of the bill. So I'll go in the same order of items there. Good afternoon, members. Pleasure to be before you today. The item before you is Senate Bill 806, which is the sunset bill for this board, the Osteopathic Medical Board, and the Physician Assistant Board. With regard to our board, the bill would do several key things. First, it increases most of the licensing fees by the amounts requested by the board, except for those that pertain to physicians. For the initial licensure and renewal fees for physicians, those would be increased by a total of $80 relative to the current fee amount. This is just over 1/5 of the increase requested by the board. The prior version of the bill provided for all the fee increases requested by the board, but those fees were changed during the Friday, May 28 amendments. And I'll pause actually just for the sake of clarity. All the members, and as well as I believe it's on the website, there was a revised analysis that was provided, which reflect amendments that came into print at about 9 p.m. on Friday evening. So that's the version of the bill that I'm working off of. And if anybody has any difficulty with that, please let me know. Included with the analysis of the bill is a fiscal estimate of the impact that this proposed fee increase is expected to have on the health of the board's fund. And at this time, I would like to turn to Mr. Varghese, as I think he may have a brief remark or two to make relative to that fiscal estimate. Mr. Varghese, are you ready?
Aaron, he informed me that he had to reboot real quick. He had a standing update, so he'll be joining us back in a minute or two.
Okay, well, maybe, Madam President, we can come back to that in a moment. Thank you. Maybe during the Q&A time. The next portion of the bill would allow the board to recover investigation and prosecution costs for a disciplinary proceeding against a physician licensee. This is consistent with the board's request in its sunset report. Third, it renames the postgraduate training license, or PTL, as the postgraduate license. It also allows an individual to be granted a physician's license if they receive credit from their program director for completing a 36-month program rather than a 36 calendar month program. This is expected to address concerns from PTL holders who took a leave of absence during their program, but otherwise satisfied the requirements of a 36-month residency program. Again, this is based upon the attestation of their program director. In addition, the bill states that upon review of supporting documentation, the board, in its discretion, may grant a physician's license to an applicant who demonstrates substantial compliance with the 36-month training requirements. The bill also clarifies that a postgraduate licensee may sign any forms that a physician is authorized to sign. Fourth, the bill states the legislature's intent that an enforcement monitor evaluate the board's enforcement efforts with a specific concentration on the handling and processing of complaints and timely application of sanctions or discipline imposed upon licensees and persons in order to protect the public. Finally, the bill extends the board's sunset date by a period of 2 years. Typically, a board is extended by a 4-year period. And as noted in the analysis as well in this section, the bill previously was going to add 2 public members to the board. That was since removed from in the prior amendments. Madam President, that concludes my summary of the current version of the bill. And I'm not sure that Mr. Varghese is back online yet. But perhaps we could give him a few more minutes, but I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can for the members.
Thank you, Mr. Bone. Are there... Please, Dr.
I'm
Hawkins.
sorry. Okay. I just want to make sure, doesn't it say that the duration of appointment for board members changed from 2 years to 4 years? From 4 years to 2 years? Does it say that?
No, Doctor, that is not the length of time that a board member may serve. That is the section. So I think you're looking at section 3 of the bill, which states this section shall remain in effect only until January 1, 2024. That is the sunset clause,
Okay,
if you will, in that section. So not the length of a board member's term.
May I ask a question regarding the postgraduate license? Does that start at day 0 or after 12 months are completed?
Does which part start at 12 months, Doctor?
Does a resident receive a postgraduate license after having completed 12 months or at the initiation of the residency? The reason I ask is that prior, when 1 year was required for licensure, during the first year of postgraduate education, one could not function in the outside world as a physician by moonlighting or other activities. Does this revised language that grants a postgraduate license grant that postgraduate license immediately on day 0 or after 12 months?
So it doesn't change the timing of when an individual would receive the postgraduate license. So that would all remain the same.
Okay. So it's just a change
Kraus.
in it's just a change in nomenclature.
Right, and they're required to get a postgraduate training license within 180 days. And remember, for moonlighting, the program director must authorize that in writing.
Yes.
And it kept in their file.
Thank you.
May I ask a follow-up on this issue? Does a person still have to spend 24 months in a single program?
Yes. And I do understand that Mr. Varghese is back online, Madam President. So if you'd like, we can go to him.
That'd be great.
So I'm up next, Ms. Lawson.
I'm sorry, I missed part of that.
Oh, so it's ready for me?
It's ready.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm
Yes.
sorry. My computer decided to take a restart right in the middle of the meeting. So
no problem.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson and the members of the board. I would like to just briefly go over how the numbers are laid out on the medical board's analysis of fund condition report that's in front of you. Sometimes it can be a little confusing if you're looking at it for the first time. So I just wanted to point out a few things. So this analysis based on the fee level in the current version of Senate Bill 806. And for the purpose of this analysis, it is assumed that the fee increase as proposed will go into effect January 1, 2022. So that's January 1, 2022. That'll be the third quarter of the next financial year, which will be budget year 2021 to 2022. So therefore, only half of the fee increase is included in the revenue projection here. So starting FY 2022 to 2023, full fee revenue is accounted for. So this shows the board revenue will be increasing to the tune of about $6.8 to $7 million for the year for the year and as new revenue basically. So, but however, just wanted to point out in the middle of the page there, you will see a line item for loan from Vehicle Inspection and Repair Fund. That $12 million projected, that loan is projected to come over to the medical board in the next year's budget, which is 2021, 2022. So with this increased $6.8 million to $7 million new revenue, plus the 12 million loan, with all that, the board's total resources minus expenditure will result in deficit budget or deficit fund balance by the end of 2022 through 2023 budget year. And further, in 2023 through 2024, with this deficit plus the loan repayment with interest will result in in somewhere around over $30 million deficit. So in short, the proposed $1.80 per license increased fee is not enough to address the board's structural fund imbalance. So I just wanted to point all this out, and I'm happy to stand by to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Varghese or for Mr. Bone before we go to public comment?
Yeah, Dr. Kennedy. So for Mr. Varghese or Mr. Bone, so there is only on revenue side where they cut it down. Did they mention anything on the expense side? Expense side is the 40% increase in the cost for the AG's office and increase in cost at the HQIU. So you can't try to fix one without fixing the other. So that's where my concern is. I understand large dues increase, but expense, you got to do both, or you can't just go into a hole by not doing one, but at the same time not touching the other. So were there any discussions, Mr. Bone?
I've aware of some discussions and ideas that people have proposed to try to address some of the board's costs. The board at a prior meeting discussed ways that we could move to more of an online licensure process, or otherwise eliminate as much paper from the process as well. And there's been some other things that we've discussed at prior board meetings that staff are doing in order to reduce expenditures. But I would say probably more to your question, Doctor, is that there's nothing in the bill right now that would provide for any cost reductions that I am aware of.
Can I add on to that, Aaron's comment, Dr. Ganade, that in addition to some of those costs that you mentioned, which are outside the agency's direct control, and I know that we can make an impact there. However, just realize that once this pandemic waivers and the rollbacks are pandemic-related savings are not there anymore when the board start to meet again in person, and also during the last year when the state actually took a 9.23% cut for all the employees' pay cut to fix the budget. All that will be reinstated. So we are looking at a bigger personnel-related bill to pay for all those cuts that were made, and there were, I would say, it's somewhere between 9.23 to about 11 to 12% increase that we will be seeing going forward, which really we cannot say no to that. That's at the state level. That must be reinstated.
And one thing just to add on to is, when the governor's emergency order proclamation expires as well, we anticipate going back to in-person meetings. And with travel, there could be some level of travel costs and the other kind of costs that are associated with that. One other item on the fees that I would be remiss if I didn't point out is that the legislature in the bill, it states that the legislature shall review the amount of fees for the board's initial licensure and renewal fees for physicians, which provide the lion's share of the revenue for the board. The bill states that the legislature shall review those fees next year to determine whether another increase is necessary to avoid insolvency. So I did want to point that out to the members as well.
Hey,
Doc-
Reggie,
Dr.
TJ.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Watkins, please.
Hey, Reggie, thank you for preparing that document. That was helpful. Do you have also the document that would lay out what the 1150 increase would have been? I'm just curious that if this fee increase of $80 over 2 years is absolutely not addressing the issue. I wanted to find in your model how, and maybe you know that offhand, just to give us an idea, the 1150, when would that have put us in a compromising position? Would it be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, if all things remain the same?
If all things remain the same, if the original 1150 fee was were to take effect January 1, 2022, then I would estimate that we would not need a loan, and we can start to build back up on our fund balances with all the savings. So I would in my earlier estimate, again, this is very not very scientific or vetted numbers because everything started happening after Friday night. So as you can imagine, this is just off the top of the head. So we can do an in-depth analysis of that. But my earlier estimate, as you pointed out, I did some number crunching, that we would probably do not need to rely on a loan, but we can build back up our bottom line with the 1150 reinstated as of January 1, third quarter of this next financial year.
Thank you.
Dr. Hawkins, you had a question?
Oh, yeah, briefly. I just want to know, is the cost recovery figure in here? Is that a line item for that? No, it's not that much in the big picture, but is that on there, Reggie?
Yes, Dr. Hawkins, that's the very bottom line. It says estimated over collection of reimbursements, where it's listed as a negative, like this current year is negative 1.7 million, and the next year 1.8 million. Again, cost recovery along with some other reimbursement items are not listed as revenue because it's really not revenue. It's a minus, it's a deduction from the expenditure. So it is factored in. Yes, sir.
Additional questions from board members? Please, Dr. Lewis.
Okay, Reggie, can you tell me in your budget, what amounts are generated from outside sources, such as special projects that the board is required to do, versus internal projects that have been requested by board members, and what percentage of monies is devoted to each?
Dr. Lewis, I'm not prepared to answer that right now. I don't have that number with me. Definitely can search and get back with you.
Yeah, the reason why I mentioned is that we are called upon internally to do special projects from board members or etc. And I'd like to know how expensive those are and whether that's a source of revenue reduction. So if you could take a look at that, that would be helpful, at least to me.
Sure.
Thank you. Be helpful to others too. Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Bone and Reggie, Dr. Kennedy again. So we somewhat reluctantly agreed last time with the, I think if I recall, we passed unanimously the board fee increase, knowing that we have to control the expenses. If we don't, we're going to get there again, and we are already with that. If the legislature agrees to go that route to 1150, we'll be one of the highest medical boards, the license fee in the country. So we can't be just going up there asking, especially primary care docs, to pay this fee for what we are providing. It really makes very little sense to me that there is no conversation on cutting costs. I can't imagine any business paying $200 an hour for paralegal. Come on, give me a break. So let's bring up those conversations to legislature rather than just the fee increase.
This is TJ. I agree with Dr. Ganadev in terms of the cost. I think the problem arises when we have a reluctance on the part of the legislature to move on fees and give us a more comprehensive look at how to address some of these cost issues. The cost issues, the biggest expense that we do have is all related to the enforcement function, the enforcement channel. And it happens to be the channel that we have the most challenges with, at least from every angle that we can assess it. So those sudden increases, well, not sudden, those increases in the legal cost has greatly contributed, as Dr. Thorpe has pointed out in 2 board meetings, that we spent most of the budget already, and we're going to run over budget just on that item alone. And I think those issues, it needs a serious look, and that's where the input of the legislature also needs to be put into place. As of the increase, the $380 increase over 2 years, I think the time frame of the 15 years may have a lot to do with how we haven't kept up with that. And that amounts to 50 cents a day, if in real terms. I know it doesn't look like that, but that's essentially what it is. And I just think that that's where our focus needs to be, is on both those issues. But unfortunately, we can only address one because one is on the table, and the current amount is not going to cut it.
So are there additional comments from board members? I'd like to hold our conversations about these specifics until we hear from the public, because I want to make sure we have kind of a methodical way of capturing everybody's comments and achieving consensus, because there's just so much to get through with this bill. So are there additional questions at this point, or should we take it to public comment and then come back for this discussion?
Ms. Lawson, this is Dr. Thorpe.
Please.
I just had one comment, and it's a structural problem, and I realized that the staff was really, at the last minute was presented these amendments late Friday afternoon, actually, I wasn't aware that these changes had been made. I've been preparing for this board meeting based on the data that had been forwarded to us, not on, there was no email or no notification that there was an updated or a revision to the bill. So I'm just a little frustrated that we're having this very serious.
So Dr. Thorpe, just for clarification on that point, there was an email into your inbox earlier today that included the updated analysis just as soon as staff put it together.
Thank you.
Ms. Lawson, I do have a lot of comments on postgraduate license, but I'll bring it up when we talk about that.
Okay. And again, for clarification, the bill was amended at 9 p.m. Is my understanding, on Friday evening. And so staff worked through the weekend to analyze it and then got us something early today. So we're all working with the same, unfortunately, very frustrating timeline. And we had no way of knowing in advance that it was going to be amended at 9 p.m. When we called the meeting. All right, should we move on to public comment?
I had a quick question, Madam President.
Please, Ms. Lubiano.
For staff, for the proposed increase, since it was essentially lowered to that $80 net increase, do we have any indication on the rationale on why that number?
I suspect we may hear, Ms. Lubiano, from some of the commenters, about that. Nothing that's been officially presented, to me. So maybe I have the opportunity to kind of circle back on that. But I think as we get through the public comment, I would expect that some of those questions may become a bit more clear.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. If it's okay with the board, I'd like to move on to public comment at this time, and then we'll bring it back for a conversation. Sean, if you could open it up.
Okay, the Q&A window is open as well as the hand raising feature is enabled if you'd like to make a public comment. We'll start off with the individuals who went early. And just for clarification, Ms. Lawson, is this specific to the fund portion or are we looking for comments?
No comments on 806 in general, on all issues.
Very well, thank you.
And this will be your opportunity to comment on 806.
Okay, so go ahead and queue up. As long as you type your name into or your yes into the Q&A box or raise your hand, I will call on you in the order that it was received. And we're again starting with some individuals who raised their hand the last agenda item, and then we held them over for this. So back to Mario Guzman. Mario, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me well? Hello?
Please go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
I'm calling to express my strong opposition regarding the amendments to Senate Bill 806 by reducing the members of the board, removing the 2 or reducing the members for the public by 2, reducing the fees from 1150 to 836. To strongly oppose to those changes. The whole purpose of this bill, the biggest purpose of this bill is to bring accountability to the medical board that, as we have exposed in previous sunset reviews, has an atrocious track record on failing to protect the public, as I can attest as a survivor of medical malpractice by preventable medical errors. So the whole idea here, the main whole idea of this bill is to reestablish the trust and the accountability of the California Medical Board to protect the public. The same way we don't have restaurants certifying that they have passed the health requirements, we have to have the same accountability with the California Medical Board by having 2 members of the public on the board. And we need the increase in the licensing fees because as a member of the public, I suspect one of the reasons the atrocious track record about investigating complaints is because they don't like it, they lack the funding required to do so. Again, to be concise, I oppose reducing the 2 members of the public to the board of the California Medical Board and reducing the license fees for medical doctors. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Lumia Rada. Lumia, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, well, thank you. Ludmila Parada, and on 2013, my husband Mario, who just spoke, he was a victim of medical malpractice at the hands of a negligent doctor at Kaiser Permanente. Negligent because an investigation by the California Medical Board found that her care was below standard. But as is norm for cases of severe malpractice, the California Medical Board made sure that the doctor did not receive any sort of disciplinary action. My husband lost his hands and his feet, and this physician has a spotless record. I was upset and disappointed by the decision of the legislature to amend SB 806 by eliminating the fee increase and, most importantly, eliminating the public member majority that was initially written in the proposal. Albert Einstein is widely credited with saying the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again but expecting different results. Yet the legislator keeps doing the same thing repeatedly for decades, allowing doctors to regulate themselves with truly dismal results, as shown by its own statistics. Less than 5% of the complaints ever result in disciplinary action at the expense of the health and well-being of all Californians. This is a true bipartisan issue. If you're a Republican, it is a waste of taxpayers' money to have an imaginary enforcement agency that gives so little bang for the proverbial buck. If you're a Democrat, it should horrify you that victims of medical malpractice are not given any sort of justice, and not only that, that they continue to harm patients whose extremely expensive medical care ends up being paid by us when they have to apply for Medicare and Medi-Cal decades before they ever should. For that reason, I urge all of you to withhold support for SB 806 until the fee increase is reinstated, and most importantly, the public member majority requirement for the California Medical Board is reinstated. Only then we can ever hope to see any change. Thank you.
For your public comment, next up we have Susan Lauren. Susan, are you there?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I did also prepare for the bill as it was. I just want to say that the two public callers that just spoke were excellent, and what they said is ditto. I'm a surgical assault survivor and educator activist who is exposing the harm that board certified plastic surgeons and others do to healthy people. It is way past time for doctors' organizations, boards, and elected officials in California to take public safety seriously. You've given doctors license to maim and kill without accountability, and as you presented this bill, it does nothing to establish public trust or to change anything. The deny, defame, and defend game with falsified records and cover-ups and posturing from the CMA, NBC, and DCA have tragic outcomes for public health. About the fees, doctors in other states found guilty by their medical boards pay for part of the cost of investigation, and that would seem to solve some of your financial problems. The thing is that now innocent people are paying with their lives, quality of life, and this corruption sucks their finances dry as well. And it's time to stop making victims pay in every way. We need a change, a real change. Now, having a public majority member on the medical board is a necessary and logical starting point, with the clear and obvious caveat that every doctor or public board member must not have conflicts of interest or bias in their approach to the medical field. My inheritance was to have large breasts on a small frame, no matter that I was fit, healthy, and muscular. Dr. Saul Berger egregiously assaulted me in his private center. It makes no sense at all in a so-called civilized society for this board to have dropped my complaint against him, except for palpable bias, corruption, and apathy. Lawyers and others say that what Berger did to me looks like a Dr. Mengele job. Remember him from Germany. He stabbed me dozens of times in places I didn't need or consent to, places that don't make sense for anyone. He removed parts of me, disabled and disfigured me, and left me in an untenable pain. Now give us a bill that's going to stop this. And I urge you to get members willing to hold reconstructive plastic surgeons to account for their crimes. There's no mitigating circumstance or reason to mutilate someone, and everyone thinks it won't happen to them, and they blame victims. And you're leaving us, I mean, days are ticking down. Days are ticking down until I may not have a roof over my head. I don't mean just 1, 2, 3 days, but the time is going by, and this needs to be addressed and put back. This bill isn't okay as it is. You need to put back something that's going to start making real changes.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Wendy Connect. Wendy, are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Hi. So I am a patient who was severely harmed by a doctor's conflicts of interest and incompetence. I relied on the medical board to efficiently discipline this doctor who continues to harm patients. Nothing has happened in 5 years that my complaint has been open, shut, and reopened again. To date, other numerous complaints have also been filed against this doctor. So I've seen firsthand that the medical board is not efficient or effective in its current state. Major changes need to be enacted in order for the medical board to live up to its mission of protecting the public. In my opinion, I implore the medical board to support 806 to enact these changes to protect the public, an enforcement monitor to monitor and evaluate the enforcement efforts of the medical board, with the specific concentration on the handling and processing of complaints and timely application of sanctions and discipline imposed on licensees. Also, the ability to recover costs from a licensee found to have committed a violation. That is an essential, as well as the board. I implore the board to do anything they can to put back the public member majority in order to protect patients. And I also agree with everyone else about the fee increase. I want to put it into perspective that the amendments change a 50-cent a day increase to a 10-cent increase. This is a clear attempt to dismantle a vital consumer protection agency, literally slamming the door on injured patients. The idea that a doctor won't pay an additional 40 cents a day to protect us shows that they're worried about transparency and accountability. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Virginia Farr. Virginia, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Hi. It's obvious that there was a gathering at French Laundry that some of us weren't invited to. So it'd be nice if they're transparent about who made these changes and why they were made. Because whoever made these changes is at the root of what's going on in the medical board. Those are the people causing the harm. I'm sure you guys are clear with that right now, right? And as evidence, there's a crisis right now. When you went to the sunset review, you should have said there is a crisis right now. We need help right now. This little talk for moments of murmuring words isn't going to solve the crisis. Please help us solve this crisis is what you guys should have done. Now, if that would have helped, because whoever changed this, added these amendments, would have turned around and changed it again. And if any other organization did the same thing as this, they'd be labeled as a terrorist organization because they disable people, they cause PTSD, they cause suicide, they leave people like us on the side of the road like roadkill. That's what I feel is like roadkill, is what the medical system did to me. And you guys are complaining about $200? How about paying $1 million for the wages I lost? How about that? That's what they should be paying me, is the $1 million wages which I lost. Poor Susan is going to be homeless pretty soon, and you guys just ignore her and treat her like nothing happened to her. Your faces to her each time, it's just horrific watching your reaction to her and your reaction to everybody else that's been harmed. Nobody, no other population in America is as vulnerable or is treated as we are. There's no one standing up for us, no one advocating for us. Legislators don't help us because of the AMA and all those people. The same people that changed this bill. So it's time you guys stand up to those people and say, enough, we can't help you as written. And furthermore, we're going to change it more and make it better. And if you don't do that, you're just as bad as them. You're leaving us like roadkill. And if you want to save money, stop harming patients, and then you can save money. Because that's a novel idea that none of you brought up yet. Put in a system so people don't get hurt anymore, and you can save money. So please take that in consideration. And please, when people are telling you stories that hurt their lives, please pay attention. Like it was your mother, father, daughter, son, or mother, or somebody you love. Because we're one of those, and we're being ignored over and over. Please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Sandra Perez. Sandra, are you there?
I am. Thank you. Hi, my name is Sandra Perez. I'm calling from Hesperia in San Bernardino County. I've testified to you before about our daughter, Jordan, who is 17 years old when she died as a result of medical negligence, mostly in part by a number of physicians at a well-known Southern California children's hospital failing to do their job. Every single complaint we filed was closed by this medical board. There is zero enforcement, there is zero accountability, and this law 806 is going to basically enhance the ability of students who have little experience in the clinic and in hospital settings to treat and evaluate patients. But your goal in supporting that is simply to allow them to have a financial benefit and not to protect patient safety. There's been a number of comments here today that clearly outline that there's risk to patient safety by supporting SB 806 in its current form. This board has gone to the Senate hearings and not once stated that they have a problem, not once stated that they need to secure patient safety. Yet you tell us that it's the legislature's problem. You can't have it both ways. I strongly urge you to withhold your support until there's a public member majority to this board and there's fee increases to allow you to do your jobs effectively. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Monique Himes. Monique, are you there?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Monique Himes and I am from Bakersfield. I spoke at the Sunset Review hearing and I am very disappointed that the public member majority was eliminated from SB 806. I am asking that you withhold your support of SB 806 unless the 2 new public board members and the fee increase is restored. The public has lost trust with the medical board, and the only way we can begin to rebuild that trust is with a public board member majority. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Marion Hollingsworth. Marion, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Marion Hollingsworth, and I'm a patient safety advocate. To say I'm disappointed in the medical board is an understatement. This revised SB 806 is a further example of enabling the board to protect doctors and not patients. You have failed to support the safety of the public in so many cases, including mine. You failed to listen to me when I warned you that one of the doctors I filed a complaint against in my father's death would harm again if he was not disciplined. Because you didn't listen, another patient died and the doctor ended up on the death certificate project. I urge you to make more changes in SB 806 so that the public is truly protected instead of the financial interests of doctors. This includes reinstating the part of the bill to increase the board members to 17, making public members a majority. The board has demonstrated time and time again that a doctor majority has a distinct bias when it comes to protecting doctors. It is rare for you to even follow your own disciplinary guidelines. You routinely give reduced probations or even reprimands to doctors found responsible for deaths. This is not in the interest of public safety. You also need to do more than just have an enforcement monitor. This sounds like you were just trying to appease the public, which is already disillusioned with your failure to take prompt actions against dangerous doctors. Who will this enforcement monitor be? Somebody handpicked by the CMA? The CMA seems to be very influential, especially in getting members and former presidents firmly seated on the board. Regarding charging doctors for the cost of the investigations, other states regularly do this, such as Florida and Georgia. Because of this, these states are not facing financial deficits like this board is. I urge you to keep the section that restores cost recovery. Finally, increasing the licensing fees to $1,150 every other year is not excessive. This is just $1.57 per day. Doctors routinely spend more than that on their morning coffee or a gallon of gas. And if you remember correctly, this board voted in January of 2020 to approve this amount. So what changed? Also, why rush a bill without the chance to fully analyze its effect on the public? I strongly urge you to recommend changes in SB 806 to truly protect and represent the public as your mission statement mandates. Thank you.
And Ms. Hollingsworth, I just wanted to make a point of clarification. The amendments to SB 806 and SB 806 itself is not the board's bill. It is the sunset. It is the vehicle, for this process. But we are reacting just as you are to the amendments that were put into print very late on Friday. Those were not amendments that were proposed by the board. John, we can go to the next commenter.
Thank you. Next up, we have Tracy Dominguez. Tracy, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. I am Tracy Dominguez, and I am from Bakersfield. I'm one of the many grieving mothers from Bakersfield who has lost a family member due to medical negligence. I am asking you to withhold support of SB 806 unless the 2 new public board members and the fees increase is restored. Here in Bakersfield, we have lost too many mothers and babies due to a broken enforcement system. We believe that the only way that we can begin to address the accountability of the system is with a board by giving the public members the majority vote. Please take that in consideration and hear our voices. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Katrina Reyes. Katrina, are you there?
I am, thank you.
Good afternoon, board members. Katrina Reyes with the California Academy of Family Physicians. Unfortunately, we don't think the proposed amendments to the postgraduate training license will address the issues we've encountered. For instance, as stated in the medical board analysis, some of the issues we've encountered, including the inability of residents to bill while moonlighting and to obtain an X waiver to prescribe substance use disorder medication, are due to the fact that the PTL is a restricted license and not due to the name of the license. We, however, look forward to continuing to work with the legislature and the medical board on a solution that will truly address all the unintended consequences caused by the PTL, including the leave policy that has disproportionately impacted female residents. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Dennis Cuevas Romero. Dennis, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good afternoon, Dennis Cuevas Romero with the California Medical Association. We thank the board for the robust discussion on SB 806. CMA remains opposed unless amended on the bill due to concerns related to cost recovery and the ongoing unresolved issues on the PTL. We appreciate the board's ongoing efforts to address the PTL issues administratively, but the language in SB 806 fails to meaningfully solve the myriad of unintended consequences since the PTL's implementation, as mentioned by the former speaker, the previous speaker, excuse me. As it relates to the fee increase, CMA encourages the board, along with the legislature, to take a holistic view on board matters, including uncontrolled costs, has been mentioned by various board members that are further exacerbating the board's fund condition. CMA is supportive of the board's effort to bring investigators back to the board's control in hopes of streamlining the enforcement process. Furthermore, CMA is interested in the enforcement monitor's potential review and subsequent recommendations as part of a broader conversation related to fees. CMA looks forward to ongoing conversations as SB 806 continues to move through the legislative process. Lastly, I will just mention, since there was conversation about the fees, the $80 figure was based off of the $8 million proposed operational loan, and that's how the figure was in conversation with Senate BMP and the author's office, how that came up. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Xavier De Leon. Xavier, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Xavier De Leon, and I am from Bakersfield, California. I am one of the grieving fathers from Bakersfield who had my life destroyed when my child died due to medical negligence. I am asking you to withhold support of SB 806 unless the 2 new public board members and the fee increase is restored. We need accountability. We need consumer protection because we have no consumer protection now. Please withhold your support of SB 806 unless the 2 new public board members and the fee is restored. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Alka Ari. Alka, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Alka Ari. I'm from San Francisco. I would like to express my disappointment in SB 806 for not doing enough to strengthen patient safety and medical oversight in California. The current structure of the medical board tasks physicians to oversee themselves, and yet decade after decade, we continue to hear tragic stories of permanent disability and death attributed to physician negligence. How many more Californians have to die before the medical board and our legislatures do the right thing for patient care? MICRA currently doesn't hold physicians accountable, so the public looks to the medical board for that oversight. I lost my sister Shilpa to medical negligence. A preventable anesthesia error during a routine endoscopy destroyed her lungs to the point of requiring a double lung transplant. I recently learned that the exact same medical error occurred at the same hospital again, and it involved some of the same physicians. Catastrophic medical negligence is more common than what the California Medical Association would like you and the general public to believe. Had the medical board performed a meaningful investigation on behalf of Shilpa, perhaps the same catastrophic error would not have happened again. Requiring a public majority for the medical board would have been a first step in rebuilding public trust. Without it, the message is clear. The medical board is no longer here to serve the public, but to serve the California Medical Association. I ask that you not support SB 806 unless a public majority is returned to the bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Michelle Montserrat Ramos. Michelle, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, board members. I am Michelle Montserrat Ramos, and I'm with Consumer Watchdog. I work with advocates across the state of California to help them navigate through your complex enforcement process. Our advocate team was incredibly disappointed to hear that SB 806 was amended to eliminate the public member majority. We believe that the only way we can possibly begin to address consumer protection and bring some accountability to the enforcement process is by giving your public members the majority vote. Consumers and patients are asking that you withhold your support of SB 806 unless the 2 new public board members and the original fee increase is restored. You know my story. You know I am still here 16 years later fighting for change for other California families. You did not find my late husband-to-be Lloyd's complaint worthy of investigation, and too many California families are still facing the same devastating fate. This lack of consumer protection has gone on for far too long. Californians' lives are of value. We are asking you to not support SB 806 unless the 2 new public board members and the fee increase is restored. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Eric Andrus. Eric, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
It's Eric Andrus from the Patient Safety League. And yes, I am biased on behalf of the consumers of this state, not the doctors that are protected by this board and by the California Medical Association. First of all, if you all get to talk about the sections separately, we should also be allowed to respond on each one separately. Also, as we may hear something down the line from a board member, and if we can only comment now, we won't be able to comment on that board member's position. Clearly, the legislators have fallen under the CMA's spell again, even though less than 1/3 of California's doctors are even members of the California Medical Association. Clearly, money talks, even at the cost of patient safety. The California Medical Association says in their argument that doctors have a greater understanding of the requirements necessary to enter the profession, the complexities of practicing in the profession, and can provide needed insight into the oversight and regulation of the profession. However, that has nothing to do with the number of doctors serving on the board. No one is talking about making it an all public member board. We're talking about making it so that doctors don't have an unfair advantage in the votes to protect bad doctors. We've seen the evidence of that, and mountains of evidence has been presented to both at the NBC meetings and the Sunset Review. The CMA doesn't want a public member majority because that would override any votes that the public feels isn't in the best interest of patient safety. TJ and other public members have talked about how the votes in the panel hearings are unfair. And if you vote to agree with the CMA, you're voting to protect bad doctors. If this passes, I am asking all the public members to expose every single time they feel their vote was overridden by a doctor member. Time and again, Dev and Howard and Richard have hidden behind their CMA ties, and we all know how Dev Gananadev protected a sex-offending doctor that assaulted a 15-year-old girl, and it turned out to be his friend, schoolmate, and coworker. And then Prim Reddy, his business partner, donated over $40 million to his new medical school, which it looks like now he's not even affiliated with any longer. All references to him have been removed from that website. Anyone who thinks CMA has any interest in patient safety is delusional. They're a union for doctors, period. They have come down against almost every patient safety effort that's come down the pike that I'm aware of since I've been doing this for the last 7 years. And I'm sure it goes back way further than that. You need to vote to not support this bill unless a patient safety majority is included and enough money for the board to operate properly to protect patients. Why is the CMA allowed to run roughshod over all patient safety issues? All patient safety issues in order to protect its tiny subset of protected California doctors. It's shameful, it's disgusting, and it's not your job as provided in the law. Do what's right. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Rosanna Davis. Rosanna, are you there?
Yes, good afternoon. Rosanna Davis representing California Association of Licensed Midwives. We are continuing to advocate for SB 806 to be amended to include language for a licensed midwife board. Licensed midwives already are subject to cost recovery in disciplinary cases, and the 50% fee increase should be going to regulation of midwives under a regulatory structure where licensed midwives are represented, not under the competing profession of physicians. During a time of unprecedented demand for licensed midwife services, we have a situation here in California where the public is left unprotected by the lack of legally binding practice guidelines for licensed midwives, which is a direct result of a long-standing regulatory stalemate that remains unresolved after more than 7 years. To make matters worse, without a regulatory body comprised of licensed midwives, members of the profession are blocked from reviewing and assessing disciplinary cases that could shed light on emerging trends and identify potential opportunities for quality improvement. While it is encouraging to see the medical board recognizes the need for a licensed midwife board, it is a growing concern that the legislature has not yet to recognize and address the inherent conflicts of interest that have led to this regulatory stalemate, which is itself the direct result of regulatory capture of the midwifery profession by medical profession. Legislative inaction on these clear and present regulatory failures has serious consequences for public safety. I would like to close by citing a familiar and respected source on the relationship between public safety and the regulatory self-determination of professions. In its position statement on SB 806, California Medical Association notes that the vast majority of regulatory boards in our state are governed by professional member majorities, and then goes on to explain why. Quote, "This is the case because professionals have a greater understanding of the requirements necessary to enter the profession, the complexities of practicing in the profession, and can provide needed insight into the oversight and regulation of the profession," end quote. It's long past time for Californians who choose licensed midwife care to be afforded the same regulatory protections as those who seek care from physicians, nurses, or any other healthcare professional in our state by having a licensed midwife board and facilitating it through SB 806 amendments. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Bridget Grammy. Bridget, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Bridget Grammy with the Center for Public Interest Law. I had written a letter last week supporting SB 806, and I am deeply disappointed by the amendments late Friday night, deleting the provisions that would have given the board the tools it needs to protect the public, particularly the addition of public members and the fee increase. As you consider your position about this bill today, I urge you to keep fighting hard to get the fee increase that you need, so that the board has sufficient resources to detect and discipline dangerous doctors. This is not a time for you to start cutting expenses, further limiting your ability to restrict or revoke the licenses of incompetent physicians and prevent further harm. I also urge you to support and to seek specific language to codify an independent enforcement monitor for the board. An independent study of the discipline system, the complaint process, and the board's interactions with complainants is deeply needed. And it does need to be further codified, as Ms. Hollingsworth recently pointed out, to make sure that this is truly an independent process and competitive process to identify who the enforcement monitor would be. And I just want to leave you with the fact that this is really a moment for you as a board to demonstrate your commitment to public protection and not the protection of doctors. I agree with several of the patient advocates that it would be a powerful statement to the legislature if you as a board demand that the additional public members be restored and that the original proposed fee increase be reinstated. So I do urge you to take these specific measures today in your vote. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Edwin Hendrick. Edwin, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Please go ahead.
Can you hear me? Hello. Can
Yes,
you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay,
Please go
great.
ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity. I just want to mention to the board that I understand how difficult it is to balance all of these aspects of care because the patients do want to know what's happening Also, as you're aware, physicians that feel disenfranchised, we've talked about targeting in the past, are also concerned. On April 12th, 2021, I did provide a letter to the MBC, and I think the bottom of the letter has two particular things that I think are important in regards to the strength and opportunity of a monitoring program, which I believe really must include both patients, physicians that may feel disenfranchised, to really look at some of the solutions. It is possible that maybe there's targeting, but there's also possible that there may be implicit bias where there's underreporting once certain cases get to expert consultants as well as consultants or reviewers. So it is my hope that the NBC really takes a really strong look at this monitoring program and figure out a feasible solution wherein patients as well as physicians that have raised concerns actually have a way to receive some education, that there's awareness on the board's part, and that we can work towards some resolution because we truly do need it in California. Thank you for your time, and that's all I wanted to mention today. But you can please feel free to take a look at the bottom of the letter on April 12th, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Kimberly Turbin. Kimberly, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. My name is Kimberly Turbin, and I ask you to withhold your support of SB 806 unless the two new public board members and the original fee increase is restored. I am a patient advocate for women and babies that are dying at the hands of doctors that continue on killing patients. Doctors that are on probation for gross negligence and sexual misconduct should be stripped of their license, especially in Bakersfield, California. You have a serial killer doctor that you refuse to take away his medical license. Please, I strongly urge you to fix this problem before he kills again. Sabrina De La Rosa should be here. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Giselle Sahili. Giselle, are you there? Giselle Sahili, your line is open. Are you there?
No.
I can hear you speaking. I've unmuted your microphone. Giselle, if you could go ahead, your mic is open. You don't have to worry about muting or unmuting yourself. Okay, she's disconnected. Next up, we have Natalie Diaz. Natalie, are you there?
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon. This is Natalie Diaz. I'm with the California Primary Care Association. We have been working with stakeholders and state departments, including the medical board staff, on the postgraduate training issues. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We've been working on this for 2 years now, and we're 6 weeks away from graduating a new cohort of residents who are unfortunately facing some challenges as it relates to licensure. And we're concerned that the proposed amendments to SB 806 will not be sufficient to address our concerns, including the ability for PTL holders to enroll into Medi-Cal and bill for moonlighting services. The restrictions of the PTL prevent residents from complying with federal regulations for eligible Medi-Cal providers to not have limitations or restrictions. And under the prior licensure structure, the residents in California did not have these issues and could bill for Medi-Cal and moonlighting services. So with that, we just ask that the amendments, be taken a close look at to really make sure that we are addressing the needs that are in front of us and continue to work with the stakeholders such as CBCA to address this issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Denise Johnson. Denise, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Denise Johnson. I lost my 25-year-old son, who is a brain cancer survivor, when he was negligently denied treatment for pneumonia. I spoke to the board, the Sunset Board in March and told my story. And I was so hoping that SB 806 would pass. I was elated to get the news that it was moving forward in a positive mode. And then I was devastated at the news that it had stopped, that it had been amended, and the people have not been heard. We all deserve high quality medical care, but that's impossible without a strong accountability system. I was devastated at the amount of medical mistakes made throughout the care of my son, but have been confident the medical board would stand strong in defense of the patient and of human life. After all, that's what comes first, isn't it? I ask that you withhold voting on SB 806 until the public representation has been reinstated. Please hear the people. We speak to you from our soul, from our heart. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. I also have a request here, sorry about that, from Marissa Vismar, but it looks like she is disconnected. Yeah. That is all the requests I currently see in queue. Anyone raised their hand and put it down, or were not called upon? Please go ahead and put your hand up, but it looks like the only one that I had left has left the meeting. So I believe
Thanks,
that
John. We'll just give it a minute or so to make sure that we've captured everyone's comments, and that no one raises their hand quickly.
I haven't seen any go up here in the last 30 seconds or so, so I think we've gotten through them.
Okay, thank you to all the members of the public for your comments. We'll bring it back to the board. And as I mentioned at the outset, I'd like to propose that we go through this issue by issue. I was keeping track as best I could of the public comments, and I'd like to take this in the following order to start. I'd like us to talk about the board makeup, the composition, this issue of the prior version of the bill, which would have added 2 public members to the board, which was deleted in the Friday evening amendments. I'd like to then have us talk about the fee increase, fund condition matters. Third, the enforcement monitor. And I'm just giving these thematic headings for the sake of helping me and the staff manage the meeting. 4th, restoration of cost recovery. 5th, update of the PTL. 1, 2, 3, 6th, I'd like to take midwives, the issues that were raised on the call. And then following that, I'd like us to talk about the sunset timing itself, which was not raised by members of the public, but which had currently has a 2-year time horizon for the board to be revisited. I'd like to talk about that. It typically is 4 years. Following that, we'll take any issues that were included in the sunset report, the board sunset report that are missing from the legislation. And then lastly, we'll do a catch-all at the end to make sure I captured all the issues. If I could just get maybe a nodding of heads as to whether that sounds like an okay way for us to go through the, what is a complex set of issues. All right, good. So we'll start with board member comments on board makeup and composition. Like I mentioned, and like Mr. Bone mentioned, the deletion or the amendment from the prior version of the bill, which would have added 2 new public members of the board. And on each of these items, we'll try to reach a consensus, and then we'll move on to the next one. We're going to keep track, and then we'll go back at the end of the process and talk through once we've got a support or oppose position. But we'll start with the board makeup composition. Any board member comments?
Dr. Hawkins? Yeah, so the question was raised in a confirmation hearing, and I said I thought that the addition of 2 members was something that could work. as long as the nominated or confirmed members knew about the medical board, had life experience, could be team players, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what, and I still believe that. One thing I didn't realize, which is new, which has influenced me somewhat, is I didn't realize
Dr. Hawkins, either you remuted or something has happened to your connection. We can no longer hear you or see you. Dr. Hawkins, you're back on mute. All right, we'll give him a second. John, perhaps you can contact him offline. I don't know if he lost his connection. It seemed pretty abrupt that it disconnected. All right, perhaps we can move on to, comments from other board members. We seem to have lost Dr. Hawkins.
Yeah, Ms. Lawson, Dr.
Please.
Campbell.
Please.
Yeah, when I saw that, remember that this is not medical board's bill. This came up from the BNP committee. We never approved and sent it to the BNP. This is what we want. I looked at all the healthcare boards, all of them. Medical board, osteopathic medical board, physician assistant board, nursing board, pharmacy board. All of them have the licensee majority. So that wasn't an issue for me. And I was somewhat puzzled why it came up. If you look at the way we voted, we can have our staff do the analysis. It was, I cannot recall public members on one side and the physicians on the other side. And the votes, we are all on panel A or panel B, and it's never one or the other which are being held. So that's just somewhat puzzling. I'm okay with it. I just want to give you my opinion.
Just to clarify your perspective was you'd be fine with the public member majority, but we would be,
no,
as you understand it, we'd be only one. Or you're fine with the amendment?
No, I will be fine with the current amendment.
Fair enough.
Liz Howard.
This is Dr. Kraus.
As I reflect on my 8 years on the board, granted, I was only on panel B. I didn't witness any actions in panel A, but I have never witnessed a circumstance where any decision was doctors on one side, public on the other side. And I've only been witness to a crosstalk and a discussion which elevated both of us. On the other hand, I'm sympathetic to the optics that are created by a licensee majority board. And I think that if we had one more public member and one less doctor, as opposed to one more doctor and one less public member, that the function of the board and the outcome of the board would not be any different, but we might earn less suspicion from the public, and the optics of having a board with one more public member than a physician might be of benefit. So personally, I have no objection to seeing a public member majority board. I do have some concern about how the new members would be appointed. And I know from personal experience, the amount of investigation and background checks and grilling I received as a governor's appointee, but I have no familiarity with the process of what occurs with a assembly leader or Senate pro tem president appointing a member of the board. So I would want any member of our board to go through the same level of background check and review as any other member of the board. And unless I know more about the process that occurs with the assembly or Senate, I would sooner see additional members appointed by the governor. But I have no objection to seeing us have a public majority board. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Dr. Kraus. Other comments from board members?
Christina, this is TJ.
Mr. Watkins?
Yes. So my experience is absolutely the opposite. You see, I have been in the situations where the doctors have voted in a particular direction and the other public members have sat on the other end of it. So, I look at it like this, very logically. Right now, and I won't speak for 5 minutes. Right now, the doctor members have held the majority for how many years? For all these years. In these panel meetings, where it's behind the scenes, where it actually counts, where you really push back on some of the cases. If you don't have the votes, you can't change the decision. But Dr. Kraus is actually correct. Having more members will not make a difference. It will not really make a difference in the outcome in the broader, Dr. Ganade, in the broader board meeting, because that's in a public forum. And in the private panel meetings, it gets a little bit more tricky. Also, I don't think that having public members, a majority, is a problem, because right now, the doctor members also defer their experience and their expertise to an expert when we do enforcement cases. It's not like they bring great insight, but we never change the decision. We know that because 99% of our decisions are all rubber stamping the decision. We may have robust discussion, but we never really change it. If the doctor members were to say, this is a decision that we disagree with, and this is the reason why, and we override the decision, I would be sitting in a different position. But unfortunately, I do not. So my support for a public majority, not just for the optics, but for the integrity of the board, which is actually in question, that has my support. Thank you.
Dr. Lewis?
Yes, I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with my colleague, Mr. Watkins. I've been on the panel A probably my entire tenure on the board, much longer than many of the members, except for Dr. Yip and Dr. Hawkins. I have never, ever seen two sides. It may be that the outcomes are not how a particular board member may wish it to be, but I think the discussions are very robust. The physician members don't always agree. So, and sometimes we listen to our public members and we say, oh, that's another way of looking at it. So I do not agree that that there'll be a different outcome in the panel A meetings. And I have been on that panel for longer than most people have been on there. And I have never seen that happen. So that's all I have to say.
Dr. Lewis, do you have a position on board makeup or the composition to propose?
My position is to keep the composition as it is. I don't think we need additional public members. I think what's happening now is we're doing a good job. Dr. Kraus mentioned the optics. So if you think the optics are important, then I'm okay with increasing it by one, but I don't see any different outcome by increasing public membership.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Any other comments from board members on the topic?
Yes, Alejandra. May I, Madam President?
Please, Ms. Campoverde.
So I feel like the message is the original message is pretty loud and clear from the legislature and our public commenters and public patient advocates as far as the importance of having a public member majority. When I just went through confirmation, that is one of the questions that I answered, and I let the committee know that I really do think it comes down to the integrity of the individual, how it is that they vote. So I by no means think it's that cut and dry. Yet I have not seen or heard an argument about how we are it is against public protection to have more public members be the majority, here for the medical board. So all I see are positive changes that can bring about, and so I would certainly support it.
Thank you. I had Dr. Thorpe and Ms. Lubiano next in order. Dr. Thorpe.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. So I'm one of the newer members on the board. I mean, I've been on the board for a couple of years, and one of the things that I feel we've had a collaborative relationship between the public and the physician members of the board. I have not felt like there's an adversarial relationship. That there's one group that is advocating for the public and one group that's advocating for doctors. I've never seen that in the sense of trying to protect bad doctors. That's just not. I've not seen that happen in panel B, and I think that so I just would point out that in those panels, the decisions that come there to us for a decision are generally recommendations by Deputy Attorney General or the administrative law judge. And on occasion, we do disagree with them, but by and large, when we do disagree and we bring them to committee, to the panel, many times we have had to change our mind because as the legal experts have walked us through the case, it's clear that the discipline is going to be provided if we agree to the stipulation in terms of the Deputy Attorney General, or we agree with the administrative law judge. The case has already been decided. Not to say that we can't intervene, but generally the cost of overturning one of those decisions is significantly delaying the process, either delays the process or puts the risk of through discipline at risk, because there is a risk that if it goes on to hearing, the case won't be as strong as it has been projected to be. So it's much more complicated than just doctors trying to protect doctors or public members want. I mean, we're all patient advocates that's our goal, is to try to be protecting the advocates. So I personally don't think that it's a significant threat necessarily to add public members, but what I am concerned about is that there's this perception that somehow now the board is going to be the public members against the physician members. And that concerns me greatly, because I don't think that's the way it's been historically, and that's not the way it should be. As a regulatory board, we should be working together to come up with decisions that are for the best of patient safety and the best for the medical profession in California. So I'm a little torn on this in terms of whether I think I would support a public, increase in the public membership. And because of this concern about the adversarial relationship between the members, I would not be in favor of adding public members.
Thank you, Dr. Thorpe. Ms. Lubiano?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. So I think overall, I am supportive of adding having a public member majority for a couple of reasons. So one, there is that optics component. If that can help us build trust with the public and gain more confidence, I think that's totally fine. And also, in the support letter from the Center for Public Interest Law, they pointed out that, by having a majority of public members, that can decrease, a risk from lawsuits for the board, as supported by the Supreme Court case, with the dental. I forget the name off the top of my head, about the dental board. So that to me also weighs in favor of that. But I did also want to make a couple points. So in my experience, I remember clearly 2 incidents where, there was that public member versus doctor, where we didn't have enough votes. So from my experience, yes, I've seen that on at least 2 occasions. But, overall, it is, as Ms. Campbell already pointed out, and other board members, it is based on, the people that are on the board and contributing their insight. So I realize that has, a big, that's a big part of it too. So there's a lot to unpack here. But did also want to point out that, with the bill, having the 2 members appointed by the pro tem and the Speaker of the Assembly, I don't believe that it's, there isn't a Senate confirmation there. So those 2 people or those appointees may not be, well, it doesn't appear that they would be vetted like a governor's appointee would be. So I think that's another part of the consideration too. But overall, yes, I would be supportive of having a public member majority. Thank you.
Are there other members with comments?
This is Howard. May I speak again?
Please, Dr. Cross.
I don't want this to be the first issue in my service to the board to find the doctors on one side of maintaining the status quo and every member of the public side looking for one more public member. So I want to go on the record as supporting a public member majority, but I would sooner see it done by rejuggling the governor's appointments rather than giving more authority to the Assembly and the Senate with an inadequate vetting process. So right now there are 7 physicians appointed by the governor and 6 public members appointed by the governor. We've got 2 physicians going off the board, so it would be easy to suggest that the governor's physician appointments drop to 6 and the governor add a public member. And I don't know that the legislature has the authority to put that into law, but the legislature, with our support, certainly has the ability to make that suggestion to the governor's office if they cannot put it into law. But I would sooner see that we support that type of rebalancing rather than to just give the legislature the authority to appoint 2 additional members, in addition to which that would raise our board from 15 members to 17 members. And although it's not the major cost, the support of a board member is an added cost to the board, not only in terms of stipend, but in terms of travel expense and reimbursements. So I think that I would be in favor of seeing a public member majority board by reallocation of the governor's appointments and not by expanding the number of appointments through legislative action. Thank you.
Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to quickly just chime in. First, I believe trust is the most important step, and it's the first step of getting anything done. And if there is a perception that there is no trust, and if the addition of 2 additional public members will start build that trust and start getting us into the right place, then I think it's a no-brainer. We should have a public member majority and try to have the 2 members added. However, I was trying to save my questions for the very end because I'm pretty much very new to the board, and I wanted to know at the very end, after you go through your 5 different discussion points, to know how the board voted before. And more importantly, are we going to die on this sword of the public member? Because are there other parts of this bill that is very vital and important to the operation of the commission and going forward where how does that balance out? And that's a question obviously we'll probably talk about in the end. So there are things like that. And also secondarily, we're not the lawmakers. We're the commission. This is not our bill. Whatever we come up with and whatever we recommend here is merely a recommendation. If we do want to make some sort of a statement, I fully understand that as a board, but there are a lot of other factors at play. So while I fully wholeheartedly support the public member, and actually I love what Dr. Krause said earlier about there are different variations of getting to a public member majority. It could be as easy as, I looked it up on the commission webpage. There are 2 current vacancies appointed by the governor. One is a public member and one is a physician member. If the governor just appointed both as public members, that would give the public majority. But then again, we are literally at the last minute of the 12th hour. I don't know where it would stand for us, and I don't know the legislative process of how, as Dr. Kraus mentioned, how that would be. Could the governor just do it on his own? Does it require the state approval? I mean, there really is no time for any of that. So while I wholeheartedly support the public majority, I would really like to hear from staff, or maybe later on in the discussion, all the other important pieces of this bill and all the other factors about it.
Thank you. Are there additional comments from board members? I'm not seeing any immediately at this point. I just want to offer my own. But by my count, this was the #1 issue that our public commenters raised to us as a concern. And it is about trust, and it's about integrity, and it's about the credibility of this board, in my opinion. And frankly, it was seemingly important to the original authors of the bill, such that the public member majority was included in it and then amended out late Friday. And frankly, that concerns me from an optics perspective. The signal that this was of importance and now suddenly is not. I do want to agree with some of the comments I've received. I've been on panel B, and I've never felt that there was any doctor versus public member, and I've been a public member for the past almost 6 years. I've never felt that. I've thought that our panel has been particularly collaborative, and I've thought that the decisions that we make as part of our public board meetings are collaborative. But much like Ms. Campoverde said so eloquently, I'm not sure what the argument against a public member majority is. I don't see it. And so I do think it's important, and I would support the public member majority for many of the reasons that, Ms. Lubiano pointed out. There was a letter in the record, our record, from the Center for Public Interest Law. And that letter really very articulately, advocates for a public member majority, and I agree with many of those. Unless there are further comments, the majority of the board here supports a public member majority. We don't all agree as to the means or whether it should be in the way that was originally envisioned in the prior version of 806, but it looks like it's headed in that direction. Are there other, and I appreciate Mr. Ruth's comments about, at the end of this, we may need to balance it and figure out what, the things that are the most important to us or the priorities for any feedback we determine to provide to the legislature here. But are there any other comments from board members on this particular issue?
So Alejandra, one last thing. As
Please.
we're talking through priorities, not only was the idea of a public member majority this resounding cry today in public comment, but trust in the medical board was a central issue in our sunset review. So when we're talking through priorities, I'd say this one is pretty high on the list.
Well put, thank you. All right, why don't we move the discussion on to our fee increase, fund condition. I'm wrapping this, Dr. Gananadev's expenses, comments into this conversation, but the issue of the fee increase and the reduction that we saw in the recent amendments and the contrast as to what we asked for in our sunset report. Any comments from board members?
This is Howard. I think that the fee increases are essential. We can't begin to do much of anything if we don't have the money to support the mission. And I don't think we can support this bill as it is. Our support should be contingent upon having adequate fee increases in order to maintain our solvency.
Madam Chair, this is Dr. Thorpe. Excuse me, this is Dr. Thorpe.
Please.
And I agree with Howard. I don't think there's any way to do this without seeing adequate financing to be able to do the work. So I am in favor of the original fee increase.
So Ms. Lawson, Dr. Kennedy, so we all voted actually to approve fee increase. So that's, in my mind, that's not even debatable, but I mean, we can debate anything we want, whatever decision we made. But my concern is that there is nothing in it to really control the cost. So I think we agree to fee increase, and actually legislature should help us to control the cost. Otherwise, I have no doubt we will be back here. Thank goodness I won't be on the board, but we'll be back here to look at fee increase again in a couple of years. So it makes very little sense to me. When you run a business, you look at both on the revenue side and the cost side. If you don't look at the cost side at all, you will never succeed. So that's the only thing I want to make sure that legislature gets from our staff or from our legislative people, that the board is also very interested in seeing how they want to control the escalating costs.
Christina, this is TJ.
Mr. Watkins?
Hi. I think when we talk about the fee increase and we talk about costs, I think we need to bring in the other part of it that should not stand on its own, and that is cost recovery. Because cost recovery as a tool is a strategic tool. And having such a strategic tool helps in that very negotiations that I keep harping about during stipulated settlements. It decreases the timeline, but it gives the board the upper negotiating powers, as it should, because it's a public protection tool. Right now, that cost recovery is a doctor protection tool. And why this is important? Because even though it appears that the cost recovery is marginal compared to it, we do not know the overall impact of that 10,000, 11,000 cases that we get that should have been resolved at the front end. Right now, all of those things are muddled together. And and that's why we haven't been able to figure it out, because I've been sitting with this trying to figure it out. And the only way you can figure it out, all these cost structures, is to actually take the system apart. And where it all comes together is at this legal cost that we spend so much money on. And that's where it comes together. And that is also where all the investigation, all of it kind of converges there. And we don't have the answers. We need the fee increase. We need cost recovery in order to just address the enforcement channel, which is the bulk of where our issues lie. It doesn't lie in the smaller issues. The staff is great at managing that. We do not have control over the other elements, and there's other strategic things that is attached to that. And I think that needs our attention. Thank you.
And Madam President, it's Ryan Brooks.
Please, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. I do believe in, we need an adequate and purposeful fee increase, but I would hope when we go back to negotiate with the author of this bill, we look at a fee increase and index it every year for inflation, cost of living, because what's going to happen is we're going to come back every 1 or 2 years looking for another increase. And I don't think that's a good look for this board because the optics are so bad with that. We should, also focus on, cost recovery, but I have a feeling that's a bigger mountain to climb for this particular bill. And so those are just my comments.
Additional comments on the fee increase, and I do want to make a note that, of course, Dr. Gananadev is correct that we already had a particular position on supporting the fee increase that we had requested in our sunset review report. And the purpose of this conversation is to react to SB 806 as it is in print today, which would propose only a modest licensing fee increase. Any other comments from board members?
Randy Hawkins, and I
May I speak?
Please, Dr. Please,
Yeah,
Dr.
and I
Hawkins.
apologize. I had all kinds of problems with this computer. I don't know what happened. Um, the fee increase needs to go through as we requested, and got the support from the legislator initially. I think it's a deal breaker. Actually, I would recommend, I don't know what's been stated before, that I would oppose unless it's put back in there because we can't function. That'd be my position. The other thing I'd like to say is, and I apologize, I mean, it was beyond my control if someone did. What I was saying about the first topic, and I don't know if it's been spoken to by anyone else, I felt and feel that you cannot predict how someone is going to behave in a meeting just because they have a label of physician and public member. I've seen the evolution of people, and I've been influenced by members, and I'm not going to say public, I've just been influenced by members as we develop a relationship. I think the confirmation process is an important process in a member coming or get recommended to the board. And I only found out just the other day that public members that are appointed by the governor go through the confirmation process that I went through, that four of us went through just a couple weeks ago. But public members that are appointed by the legislator don't go through that same process. And I don't know what their process is in dividing and deciding who to recommend for appointment. But I think something may be missing because we've seen just with what's happened with the amendment, they're influenced, and for good and bad, they're influenced by whoever they're influenced by. And so my only point is that I support additional members, but I really would want to have some kind of an idea about how they're being selected, only because my assumption that they go through the confirmation process is not accurate. That's my comment about that. And I already made my comment about the fee increase. I think we need to make a stand and say it's a deal breaker. I mean, we may not be able to change what they say, but I think they need to know that we feel strongly about this fee increase. It's crazy to try to do anything else.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. And just for your benefit, the essentially consensus or the majority was that a public member majority was supported by the board. There were multiple comments about wanting to see a rigorous vetting process for all members of the board. All right, so we back to the fee increase. Are there any other comments on that? Any divergent points of view about the level of fee increase that's necessary?
Just a comment, this is TJ. It's been 15 years since this board has seen a fee increase. The average board has a fee increase maybe 5 to 7 years. So we've missed 2 cycles. Well, this is our cycle. This is our time coming due. And the ask seems way high, but the previous ask was, I think it was $180. The previous increase was just $180. And at that stage, we gave up cost recovery for that $180. In my opinion, the results are pretty much in through the enforcement function of what the results we got for that. I think that asking for the $1,150, the extra $367 over the 2 years is not such a far ask if you think that we are 15 years late, well, at least 7 years late for asking for making such a request. And I think, like Randy said, this could be that deal breaker when you just ask for what you want, because it's essential to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments, or it looks like there's a pretty clear consensus that the fee increase at our original amount is what the board supports. All right, I'd like to move on to the next issue. And again, I was sort of trying to flag these in terms of the number of times we heard comments. The next issue I have is the issue of an enforcement monitor, and the current bill, as I understand it, and Mr. Bone, correct me if I'm wrong, but the current bill states that it's the intent of the legislature essentially to have an enforcement monitor evaluate our enforcement efforts, but there really it's lacking in specificity as to what that enforcement monitor would do or how that enforcement monitor would be appointed. And I guess I'd have the board look at pages 4 and 5 of the analysis Mr. Bone provided. But Mr. Bone, I don't know if you have any further comments as we get into this discussion.
Just to briefly state that yes, the language is very thin in the bill that pertains to this. It's merely intent language. So this is clearly, to me, this is a placeholder, right? And so this is the legislature saying we think this is a good idea, but that clearly this needs to be fleshed out, further. But there is a little bit of language in there on the scope, which states they would monitor and evaluate us with specific concentration on the handling and processing of complaints and timely application of sanctions or discipline imposed on licensees and persons in order to protect the public. That's almost every word that's in that section of the bill right now.
Ms. Howard, I like the concept of there being an enforcement monitor or ombudsperson, but I don't like the thought that this cost would be tacked on to the cost to be paid by the medical board. So I would be in favor of language in our support position if we take one, that the costs of enforcement monitoring should not be borne by the medical board.
Aaron?
This is Dr. Thorpe.
Oh.
Dr. Thorpe and Dr. Lewis.
So I agree with Howard. If it were to be implemented, it certainly shouldn't be part of the cost structure for the medical board. And there needs to be language that would actually delineate how the cost would be paid, how it would be paid for. The thing that concerns me is that there was a prior monitor with the last with legislation before, as Aaron so helpfully pointed out. And it's interesting to me that we've never, at least I've never seen any report on that monitor's function, what they did, why it was abandoned, why it was, it happened for 2 years, but then it was abandoned. So it sounds to me like either it wasn't funded properly, or whoever was appointed to it was not effective at their job. I don't know what the issue was, but it would be helpful to know that information, I think.
Madam President, I'd be happy to add a little bit more context if that's
Please.
helpful. So the prior monitor was funded by the board. The individual was selected by the department, by the DCA director. The board was required to reimburse the department for all the costs associated with the employment of the monitor. And then to your comment, Dr. Thorpe, with regard to the timing and kind of their work and what came of it, it was by design a limited term position. So the person would have been selected by March of 2003 was when the person was to have been appointed, and they were required to issue an initial written report of their findings and conclusions that fall in October of 2003, with updates every 6 months, and with a final report coming March of 2005. So it was really just a 2-year term for that person, and that was the intent of the legislature at that time.
This is TJ. I would like to make a comment.
Please.
Hello?
Ron. Sorry, Ron.
Yes.
Sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Aaron, tell me, is this bill a gut and amend left over from Hill's bill to Roth? And if it is a gut and amend, do they typically lack specifics?
The bill, Doctor, is not a gut and amend. The bill, well, I guess sometimes I guess guts and amends are in the eye of the beholder. This bill was always intended to be the sunset bill for this board and some other boards. There isn't a relation. This bill doesn't have any relationship to Senator Hill, who's termed out now. Senator Hill was the author of the board's prior sunset bill 4 years ago. But no, this has always been a Roth bill, who is the current chair of the Senate Business and Professions Committee. Does that help, Doctor?
Yeah, it helps because I know gut and amends, they just take one number, the number stays the same, and they just insert their own in it.
Yeah,
that's what I was told it was a gut and amend, but you say it wasn't.
I don't consider this to be
okay.
To be
now the question also at the 11th hour at 9 o'clock, there's no chance for stakeholders to comment. Is that correct?
On the bill further? Is that what
on
you're
the
saying?
amendments?
Oh, sure. No, I think that. So I've got in the analysis, there's a discussion of some of the next steps in the legislative process. So by Friday, this Friday, the Senate is due to approve the bill. And then it will have a hearing in the Assembly Business and then it moves over to the Assembly. So we're really only kind of at the halfway, you know, we're approaching halftime, if you will.
Okay.
And then the Assembly Business and Professions, they will hear the bill. The Assembly Appropriations Committee will hear the bill, and then the full Assembly will vote out the bill. So those things will take place over the next 3 months or so. I would expect that there's going to be amendments in the Assembly. And in that case, then the bill will go back to the Senate, and the Senate will have to concur or will have to agree with the Assembly's amendments that they made. So that's at least 4 more votes that the legislature will have to take on the bill.
Long process.
Mr. Bone, just one other point to that. We do expect to have our subsequent board meeting. We expect to be able to comment on whatever the version of the bill is at that time before it's ultimately approved. Am I right about that, Mr. Bone?
You are right. That would be towards the tail end of the process at that point in that middle August meeting. So you know, it may be a lot will have likely been decided by then. I guess it's fair to say. But yes, the board will have another opportunity, absent if the legislature follows the regular process, I would say, then the board will have an opportunity to do so before it gets its final approval, before the legislature adjourns by September 10th.
Right, but the purpose of this meeting is for us to, have some positions so that our staff can continue to have conversations, and your Sunset review team, which includes myself and now Dr. Hawkins as the vice president, can have the conversations, as this bill continues to work its way through the process. So I'd like to bring it back to this concept of the enforcement monitor. Are there any other comments? Please, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, I think the cost issue is kind of a mute issue for me personally on enforcement monitor. And I'll tell you why. If we are foregoing like 1.5 to 2 million a year on cost recovery, that serves the benefit of the doctors, then I think we can fork out the money, which we will not be even close to those numbers, for an enforcement monitor that could give us an indication of process improvements, suggestions for how to do things different, and at the same time reestablish the public trust, the integrity, and the credibility of the system, because that's actually why the monitor is put in place, because those things are in question right now. And I think for the cost, I think the cost is a marginal cost if we think about it in bigger terms.
So, sorry, Mr. Watkins, I just want to make sure I understand what I heard from you. And I'm not sure I understand the relationship between cost recovery and the enforcement monitor. As I understand it, the bill does currently provide for us to be able to recover our costs like the other DCA boards do. But was there? I guess I was not understand the connection.
I was making a connection that the cost recovery benefits the doctor, and we are willing to forego 2 million of that per year. In this case, up to now, not before this bill, up to now, And now we just need the monitor to come in, and it will not even be close to that, maybe 10%. So
Okay.
that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Other comments about the enforcement monitor?
Yeah, Ms. Lawson, the word doesn't rhyme with me. No other board or the California Bar Association or any other board doesn't have quote unquote enforcement monitor. It's some reason or other, when it comes to medical board, somebody throws it as if it really makes a tremendous difference. So I don't support it, but I don't, in my mind, in the end, it's not going to any add value. So that's why I think I agree with Dr. Cross that if they want that, let the cost come from somewhere else.
Can I comment? Because once again, the registered nursing board has just done the same thing and they paid for it. It is kind of standard practice for the board to pick up the expense for trying to update their enforcement system. So I don't see why we're deviating from, a standard practice. And well, it speaks to a bigger issue, but we won't go into that. Thank you.
Additional comments on this concept of the establishment of an enforcement monitor? Dr. Yip?
I think it's a good idea. Just like to have a neutral observer and to make improvement. There's always room for improvement. Ms. Judith Feldman, a professor, used to be the monitor years ago. I wonder how she was paid. So I don't think it's going to be that expensive. Maybe Bridget can comment on that. But I think the idea of having a monitor is a very good idea. And if its cost is manageable, then we should go for it.
Thank you, Dr. Yip. And I think to answer that question, I believe that the board absorbed the cost when Julie was the prior enforcement monitor. And Aaron, is that correct?
So I don't have any actual receipts from the time, but just based on, forgive the joke, but based upon the statute that created the enforcement monitor, I'm looking at it now. It states that the board was responsible to cover all the department's costs associated with that.
Madam President,
Hawkins, I'm sorry.
That's a quick question. Historically, it's only my second meeting. I'm not quite. What is this? What problems is the enforcement monitor trying to solve?
I'm happy to try to take a stab at that, Mr.
Please.
Brooks. At least in referring back to the prior version. So in the analysis, Mr. Brooks, we noted that there were several goals, and I'm looking at pages 4 and 5 of the analysis. Improving quality, reducing timeframes, reducing a complaint backlog, assessing value of the sources of information that the board relies upon, consistency in the area of its discipline. So those were kind of the key pillars that the enforcement monitor was tasked with reviewing and reporting on. I confess I have not read the monitor's work from those 17 or so years ago, so I couldn't tell you further than that, Mr. Brooks. But those were the goals for the prior monitor at the time.
And just to add my understanding was that the prior enforcement monitor did present certain recommendations which were then adopted that were believed to be improvements, if you will, to our processes. And so I do think there's an opportunity, and I think that the enforcement monitor concept is a good one insofar that it's one that has worked in the past, and it's one that we're familiar with and that the legislature is familiar with. I know that there were other concepts proposed, as part of, I think it was the Center for Public Interest Law's initial comments as part of our sunset review process. They proposed the concept of an ombudsman, creating a new type of position. But this one to me feels like one, I support it, but it feels like something that the board, DCA, and the legislature is familiar with as a process, and that could potentially lead to some good outcomes and some process improvements, other improvements for the medical board.
And to that point, Madam President, I don't know if it's correlation or causation, but when the legislature approved some further bill following the work of the enforcement monitor, there was a fee increase done with that. Again, don't know if that was a recommendation of the monitor or its time had come, so to speak, but that was something that was done at the same time.
Madam
Dr.
President,
Hawkins? I'm sorry.
I would just point out also that at the same time, however, they eliminated the diversion program of the medical board, which is a serious loss for practicing professionals in the state. We still haven't reinstated that, and with all of the restructuring of the board, you know, there's been authorizing legislation, but there's been no funding for it. So I think it's really unfortunate that we haven't been able to actually implement a diversion program, or at least a physician wellness program for those physicians who really do have, you know, the illness related to substance abuse, and that we are, especially at a time when we've been under this incredible amount of stress with across the board with COVID-19, that people are undergoing significant traumatic stress on the front lines across the state, and we are really, it concerns me that we're not sending the right message to those people that have been on the front lines for all this time.
Dr. Hawkins?
Dr. Hawkins, please.
Yeah, so I would say in general, I'm in favor of this enforcement monitor concept, but I think the devil's in the details. And I think that when Aaron gave us the analysis, it sounds like a lot of what we're supposed to be doing already, but it has the opportunity, the potential to improve the confidence of some of the public organizations. But I think we really have to figure out what they are going to do, because we're supposed to be doing this already. And we are all familiar with inefficiencies in our lives and practices and whatever organization we belong in. So we think we just need to be really, really careful about how this is structured, so it's not, you know, throwing money away for something that, you know.
Alejandra, may I, Madam President?
Ms. Capoverde, thanks.
I certainly support it, and I think any opportunity to kick the tires on process and so on for any organization is that a great opportunity. And so, you know, having a neutral individual be able to take a look at where we might be able to improve. Again, I see nothing but a positive exercise here that we could, again, to what was said earlier, potentially look for what we can do legislatively in the future. So I support it.
Ms. Lawson, I wish I knew what exactly they would do. If it is like a consultant recommending things, I have absolutely no problem. If it is a consultant, it's our cost too. Remember that we hire. But I don't know what all they're asking to do. So it all depends upon what are their duties and and also anytime we hire a consultant, we know the cost. What's it going to cost us? So if it all fits in, which fine, I think anyone can, like Ms. Campoverde said, if anyone can help us to improve process, we're all good with it. But we need to know, we don't just jump into the fire without knowing some details.
Thank you, Dr. Ganadev. Are there other comments, Dr. Lewis?
Yes, I just want to follow up on Dr. Thorpe's comment, which I agree 100%. Ms. Lawson, is this part of our discussion about the diversion program and the lack of now? Is this part of what we can talk about today, or ask Aaron for what reason that was removed when we spent so much time developing it as a board? So Aaron or anybody?
I'm happy to talk about it.
Oh, good.
Ms. Lawson, if you want me to. It's
Please.
It's a side issue, but the diversion program, it did not operate well, and when you have diversion associated with the medical board, it's ripe for charges that the public is not being well protected if the board is aware of physicians who have a substance abusing issue and are still in practice if the program is not robust and carefully attended to. And so the board voted to discontinue that program. And what we have now that's in process is its authority to develop a physician health and wellness program that must follow the uniform standards for substance abusing licensees. And so the participants will fund it. That is built into the legislation. The participants must follow the program very carefully, because if they don't, then a breach is reported to the board, and that triggers the enforcement process. So the board can refer people, individuals can self-refer to the program, but by doing so, they are making a commitment to abstain completely and follow all of the program's requirements, or they will be reported to the board, and that triggers the enforcement process.
Okay,
There
so
will be no diversion. So
was this 806? Was 806? Was it in 806 at
no,
all?
it has
Was
nothing to do with that.
It is not.
No, it's existing legislation. There's a rulemaking in process. It's currently being reviewed by DCA, and we'll have ongoing discussions with it as it goes through the process.
Thought it was in 806. So
I'd like to bring it back to this enforcement monitor concept, because we do have a clear consensus that is developed around support of the enforcement monitor in concept. Aaron, what specific direction, if any, would you need from us? Or as to that, because I do think that the board, together with the consensus around the supporting concept of an enforcement monitor, because we don't have detail right now, I sense that there's some hesitation or skepticism on behalf of the board about just what this might look like, or how far we should go with the support.
Well, I'd say, Madam President, the board has the opportunity at today's meeting to scope out some things that they think the monitor should be focused upon. So I think that's an opportunity that's present right now. I wish I had more details that I could share with the board in terms of what the legislature's thinking is behind that. I've been unable to obtain that information, so I can't share that. But if this concept is still somewhat in its early stages of development, so to speak, then this might be a good time for the board to say what they think the monitor should do.
well, I think it's in its infancy. I don't think we have enough information, so maybe this is the time to start putting down words to create a framework for the monitor, right? Okay.
Yeah, if the board choose to.
I've got some ideas that I could share. And I think it comes also from the original language that we can just amend some of that language. And I think it starts off on an analysis piece that you sent us. It talks about improving process, complaint time, improve the quality, fairness, consistency of the complaint process and the investigation process would be one area. reducing the timeframes for the complaints process and investigation. It would be looking at any backlogs. It would do an assessment on, cases that are being dismissed, if those structures are rigorous enough, and if our systems are in place to communicate to the outside, to the complainants, the public, and everybody else. And there's a section that says we assess the consistency, the fairness, and the correct application of the disciplinary process. I could go up and talk about, the following the disciplinary guidelines with specific reference to the probation period and other elements. I could go into the consistent implementation of, the laws and the rules that affect the disciplinary process. If there's any of those rules that are now inhibiting our ability to actually pull off, to really streamline the complaint and disciplinary process. And that's just a few that I wrote down. I think we could, if we took a moment, we could craft it, or we could give that in the meantime and expand upon it. I could write that.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. And I do think that to this extent you all can pull it up, the framework for the prior legislation that is included on page 4 of the analysis that was sent by email earlier today, that includes, both sort of the outline for the enforcement monitor themselves, that it was appointed by the DCA director, there were minimum requirements. But the goals there, I think, really are the goals that we would have for an enforcement monitor here. And I'm not, I actually think they're good ones. They were workable before. There was a positive outcome from that process. So I'm not sure. Well, frankly, I think that's a good framework for us to start from in terms of providing feedback to the legislature. Here, I guess I would invite comment, or whether there's any. I saw
agree.
a couple of nodding heads, but it's hard to tell on WebEx.
So I'm looking at Christina, what you mentioned. I think majority of is, as I said, it's a consultation process. They're going to recommend something to us, and having an independent person appointed by the DCA director, I'm fine with that. So
yeah. Okay.
I'm fine with that too, Dr. Thorpe. I'm fine with that too.
Thanks, Dr. Thorpe. Perhaps I'll ask the question a different way. Are there any dissenting voices on that topic, or anyone with a different set of ideas that we should consider as a group?
Just one deal. I think the more independence the monitor has and no ties, the more credibility it's going to get from the system. Just as a side note, we are trying to instill a level of trust and credibility. If it is too close through DCA or any other establishment here, it may still be perceived under the board's control. Just by mere simple optics that the current DCH head is also a previous executive officer of this board. I just want to be upfront about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. It does sound to me like there's a consensus on this point of the enforcement monitor. So I'd like to move on to the next issue. And again, we're going to just check in once we get through these on all these points. But the next one I had on my list was restoration of cost recovery. And again, my understanding of SB 806 is that in its current form, even with the amendments from Friday, that it does repeal the language that prevented in the past the board from obtaining cost recovery. So it would restore cost recovery as it's currently drafted. That was our position in our sunset review report. So I guess to the extent anyone disagrees with it, our current on the record position is that we'd like to see cost recovery restored, but I'm open to any comments if anyone wants to see that position changed. All right, that's an easy one. We'll stick with our adopted position. The next one is perhaps a little bit more complicated. The postgraduate training license issues. Does anyone, the current amendment, and maybe Aaron, maybe you could just go over what the current version does, and then we can have a conversation around this particular issue.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to. So it does, there's a few things that it does. The first is it renames the program from the postgraduate training license to the postgraduate license. I believe the reason why it does so is that that name change is aimed at the fact that the license is it's not exactly the same as a physician and surgeon license. The limitations are that you have to be practicing within your program or anywhere else with the permission of your postgraduate training program. And I think there's an idea that the fact that it's called a training license is at least a part of the struggle that the Department of Healthcare Services has, because this is aimed at the billing issue with Medi-Cal when these individuals are moonlighting outside of their programs. The second part that is intended to correct, we believe, would deal with X waivers, which is a process that after an individual receives approval from the DEA, then they have to get approval from SAMHSA, which is the substance abusing. I'm blanking on the name. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. It's a federal agency that a physician must receive approval from in order to prescribe certain medications that help with opioid addictions. Again, we think the same. This renaming is aimed at fixing both of those two challenges there. The next item that it does is it clarifies into the law that you do not need to have 36 months of calendar postgraduate training, and instead states that you can qualify for a license if you receive credit for completing 36 months of postgraduate training. Again, this is based upon the attestation of your program director. And then the third item in there is it clarifies that this postgraduate license holder can sign any forms that a physician can sign. There have been some reports of certain disability forms and perhaps some other unemployment related forms that are being rejected because they bear the signature of a PTO holder. Finally, it authorizes the board in its discretion to grant a physician's license to an individual who demonstrates substantial compliance with a 36-month postgraduate training requirement. So that could be some sort of a catch-all that helps to kind of help people who are kind of in the margins, so to speak, but have otherwise demonstrated compliance, but perhaps for some technical reasons they are unable to comply and be granted a license. So thank you, Madam President. Those are the provisions with regard to the PTL.
Comments from board members?
Yeah, Ms. Watson. Yeah, thank you. They fixed some issues, but they haven't fixed a lot of other issues. I'm speaking as a person who is at an academic medical center with 200+ residents training, and I created my own surgery residency program. So we got, especially in the primary care side, I'll give you one example. That is, so some of my fellow medicine residents, about 18 of them are finishing in June, and they will get the California license very close to or just after. It takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months to get privileges in a hospital. So they can't work. These are young people with big loans. These are not some bad doctors who are trying to protect or anybody is trying to protect. So we are stuck with that. So I was thinking about this. My thought process is that usually we did the 3 years mainly because Majority of the time, 1-year internship and getting a license. Some states allow that. We had that for the US graduates. We had that for 2-year graduates. And the trouble was that the people did 1 year of internship. They did not get a second-year spot because they weren't good enough. So they were able to go full license and practice medicine. And the second was the international graduates. They did 1 year in one place. They didn't have a second-year spot. So they did a second year in one place, but both are internships. So to correct it, we went to 3 years. We didn't realize that it caused a lot of problems. One of the problems which it fixed, looks like most probably, is especially female residents when they take any kind of time, couple months, 36 months wasn't met. So they were not eligible for license even if the program was going to graduate them. So that part is fixed. So the moonlighting issue, I'll come back at all the way in the end. But the problem of getting a license, getting privileges, and going into practice, it's still there. We can't even help them in California, forget about if they go into another state, because it takes the significant amount of time to get a license, plus another 3 to 6 months to get privileges in a hospital. So these issues, the only thing I can think of, I'm just throwing an idea at, is that if we can make, I'll come back to when we can give PTL license, but postgraduate license. So first thing is, if we can make it, instead of 36 months, if we can make 30 months. Usually no program fires somebody after 2.5 years they're a resident. Most of the time they're fired as first year, sometimes in second year. It's extremely uncommon for somebody to fire in the third year. So you do have the consumer protection. And the other problem with, so 30 months will help that way. And the other problem with the postgraduate licensee is, somebody probably will throw stones at me, program directors, but I don't think the intern should be able to practice just like a licensed physician and sign any paper, bill for stuff and all that. So if we have a PTL actually after not PTL, postgraduate license, they can function under the hospital license first year as an intern, then they need postgraduate license in the second year. After 1.5 years of postgraduate license, they can apply for a full license. So that way it takes care of a lot of problems. And this one only took care of, even partially, if there's a tough program director who he or she wants this young female residents to actually finish 36 months, then that person is still not eligible to get a license after 36 months residency is done. So these are all the issues I just wanted to point out to the board, because I talked to a lot of program directors and I am at a place with a lot of programs.
Thank you. And any other comments about the PTL, how SB 806 is currently addressing it?
Madam President, so I would just say it's clear from the people who are being affected by this, the family practice residents and the community clinics who are struggling to staff their one of the big things that this board does is it licenses doctors so that there is a public, so that they can serve the public. I mean, that is a huge public protection piece, is providing doctors to be there to take care of patients. And that, I would just say what Dr. Ganandev has pointed out, and I think, unfortunately, I can't add any more to the wisdom that he already provided, but clearly what this language does is not enough for those family docs that are coming out of residency, or for those community clinic programs where they are depending heavily on either second and third year residents to help staff their clinics, it doesn't answer the question for either one of those, at least the way it's currently written. So I would be in favor of whatever we can do to make that better. Definitely.
Thanks, Dr. Thorpe. And actually, it would be helpful to me if staff could just fill us in on, I know that there was a significant amount of work with other state agencies, you know, and also with any federal regulatory authorities that was underway even prior to our last board meeting to attempt to resolve some of the challenges that we understand they're facing. Is there any update on those conversations, or has any progress been made at addressing whether it's this X waiver issue or some of the moonlighting Medi-Cal reimbursement issues that we talked about previously?
I'm happy to try to start the first part of that answer, and then I think maybe Mr. Varghese, not to put you on the hot seat, but I think I'm not sure, you may have some parts to fill into this as well. But there has been, and I'm forgetting the exact timing of the meeting, Madam President, but there was a productive call with board staff, some of the advocates that we've heard from, legislative staff, and the Department of Healthcare Services on the issue surrounding specifically the moonlighting issue. And so not difficult to characterize that as a lot of progress, but it was important, I think, for the legislative staff to hear some of the things that we've been hearing from those kind of our, the prior conversations. I know that our staff have made numerous attempts to get input from SAMHSA, and that's been a great difficulty. Now they've had an administration change over during this time period as well, so not sure to what degree that may be impacting. But it's been a difficult and sticky thing, unfortunately, with the number of other agencies and folks that are involved. Mr. Varghese, do you have anything to add from some of the maybe the context that you may have had in other states?
Yes, what Aaron, you mentioned, that those are the notes that I have from that meeting that we all attended to. Yes, some other states, I mean, we have experience with similar kind of, but the training licenses are really a different makeup, or different, how it's regulated is different from each state to each, one state to the other. So they're not really considered fully licensed like what we go through here. But from my experience from Oklahoma is that the training licensees are allowed to work within the program, and they are being reimbursed by Medicaid or Medicare equivalent of California in that state, if they work within the program. But if they work solo outside, they are not reimbursed. So for that matter, I think it is similar setup here, and as it is in other states too. But again, going back to the only difference that I've seen here is this 36 months requirement, and the leave policy issue is being raised by American Board of Family Medicine, ABMS, and some of those boards do allow longer leave policies, and programs in different states have aligned their leave accordingly, and states really trust the program directors to inform the board when a graduate is ready to be licensed, and they pretty much go with the program director's assessment if they're eligible to get licensed. But here, since the way the PTA legislation is written, the way it is here, we actually are counting days and hours to see if they completed that 36 months postgraduate training.
All right, thank you, Mr. Varghese and Mr. Bone. And so to help guide this discussion, the current bill would solve for that problem, and would allow the license holder to meet the requirement of the 36 months if their program director grants them the credit for completing the 36-month program. So I think that we've solved for that. We haven't solved for some of the other issues yet, and I'm hearing that we're not making, perhaps the progress has not been made on the administrative front, agency to agency, to solve for some of those things. And so I guess the question I would have for the board is whether we'd like to request further amendments to SB 806 to address some of those other issues that we've heard raised.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would strongly recommend, if you want a motion, I can make it to make him eligible for after 30 months of residency. The main reason, as I pointed out, is that the lag times to get a license and the lag time to get hospital privileges, keeping these young people anywhere from 4 to 6 or 8 months without a job, because they can't go into workforce without a full license, and they can't go anywhere to any other state without a full license.
Okay.
Deb, Randy, question. Aren't those 6 months, 2 rotations, a significant amount of time that the resident is not getting, not working, not getting training? If you reduce it to 30, I mean.
No, Randy, Madam, can I answer? It's not they're not working. Actually, they have a lead time to get the license and actually get privileges in a hospital. As soon as June 30th is done, July 1, they can start at my own place, at your own place where you train the resident. Otherwise, they won't get privileges. For the medical staff offices in a hospital take minimum 2 and most of the time about 4 months to give privileges to somebody, because they got to do the entire process just like we do, from medical school on, the background checks and everything else.
So you're not shaving actual time off of training? That's
Yes.
what I.
Yes, you are. We're not saving any time on the training. We are saving time for them to get into workforce.
Okay.
I'm not sure I'm understand or following how reducing the requirements for completing a 36-month program to a 30-month program is not reducing the length of that program or the length of the training.
We don't have the right to decrease the length of the program. That's done by ABMS. So for them to be board eligible or to be called family doc or internist, they have to finish 36 months of training. So that's not in our purview, that's somebody else's. But what we did was we took that and made the license. To get a full license, you need 36 months of training. So what it did we didn't realize is that, yes, it's great, but they still have to get a license after that is done, and they still have to get privileges. So for example, you finished the family medicine doc, you finished your training June 30th, and you get a license somewhere around there. And if you're really good, you get in July 1st week. You get the license, and then you apply for privileges at your hospital. And that will take another 4 months for you to get privileges. You can't practice. So you're stuck doing nothing for 4 months. You guys understand me?
No, I'm not sure I'm understanding why that wouldn't remain a problem.
Yeah.
By us changing the length of time requirements. So I do, and I guess I don't want us to get totally off track on a new issue, but to the extent the board wants us to talk about this potential 30 months, I guess I'd invite other board members to comment on that particular issue. I'm not sure I'm prepared because I haven't analyzed or thought about that particular issue as part of this SB 806 analysis.
Can I help to try and clarify that? It's not changing the training length of time. You still have to have a 36-month postgraduate training to be able to be board eligible. be able to sit for boards, to be able to actually get your credential. What I think what Dr. Ganandev is recommending is that from the standpoint of licensure, we used to license people after 12 months of an internship, and they were fully licensed. We agree that that's not a great idea, but probably if somebody's had 30 months of training, they're in their third year of residency, to say that they're eligible for licensure in January of the year that they're finished, they're completing, or whatever, 6 months before they complete their training, they could apply for licensure so that then when they do complete their training, they can then at the same time apply for medical staff privileges as soon as they get their license, and then they would be ready to go to work right away after they complete their training and their whole full 36 months. But from terms of our licensure, we would only require them to have completed 30 of the 36 months. We still expect them to complete the 36 months, but we would allow them to be board eligible for licensure, for a full licensure, 30 months out after they for completing a 30-month program, or for 30 months of that program. I think that's what Dr. Ganandev is trying to say. Is that correct?
Okay, so that's helpful. Thank you. That's not something I'm prepared to offer a particular point of view from my perspective on, because I haven't spent any time thinking about it before now. But how about other board members?
Madam Chair, may I speak? This is
Please,
TJ.
Mr. Watkins.
My concern with this is that we have not solved really some of the underlying issues that was brought up in that stakeholder meeting when they had a whole list of issues that was brought about. I'm not sure if this is not shortening the period, or just allowing an extra 6 months for them to apply or get into the system. I don't know if we will actually resolve the actual underlying issues, because it looks like there's a name change, but did the Department of Health change the status? You know, that all the core issues, it almost appears to me, and please correct me, that we did not solve for those problems. The Department of Health issue, the X-waiver issue, all of these issues, because those were very fervently expressed by the stakeholders at our stakeholders meeting. And I mean, I didn't understand all of it, but just as a point.
Madam Chair, if I could just respond. If you have a full license, then all of those other issues go away. Your ability to qualify for credentialing with Anthem or Blue Shield or Medi-Cal or Medicare, or to be able to qualify for a X waiver, all of that goes away if you have a full California license. And if we I'm not saying that I advocate for this. I'm just saying, just explaining it. It does seem to make sense to me if we make the licensure eligibility 30 months. I mean, we used to do it in 12 months, TJ. You know, I was licensed in 12 months after and you know, I'm not saying that that was the right thing. Probably there are many people that regret that, actually, probably, but nonetheless, it did happen. And the point is that 30 months of a 36-month program is essentially completing the 3 years. You're a third-year resident, you're the senior, you're the guy running the show. So if we allow people to have a full license at 30 months, with fully anticipating they're going to complete their 36-month training program, then it gets rid of a lot of those other concerns. It may not get rid of all of the leave concerns that some of the, and I think that's another issue that we need to address, but I think it does get rid of a number of them. And so if Dr. Ganandev made a motion, I would certainly second it.
Madam Chair, this is Howard.
Sorry, Howard, go ahead. We're just fixing a headset problem that I'm having.
I'm beginning to lack confidence that we're going to come up with the ideal language to fix all of the postgraduate licensing issues this evening. And it might be better to have Mr. Bone understand that we would like to take away all of the barriers that we have unwittingly placed in the pathways of these young physicians, rather than to feel that we have to refine all of the language this evening.
Madam President, just very briefly, if I may. So I do have the letter in front of me. This was shared with the members, I think prior to a prior meeting. And this letter includes the concerns raised by the coalition of of physicians. And I think with the biggest challenge, and I forget who was, I think Dr. Thorpe was explaining it, that if we were to move up, shorten the amount of time that it would take for an individual to receive their full and unrestricted medical license, that would mitigate, that goes a long way. Now, I believe, if they were sitting next to me, they would be saying that their position is they wish to revert back to the 12-month and the 24-month time frame that was the previous scenario 4 years ago. I believe that's their solution. So instead of going to 12 months, if we went to 30 months, that would be at least a marginal improvement. I guess it's fair to say. And because once you get your license, then Medi-Cal billing is no longer an issue. The X waiver issue is resolved as well for those folks. Now, to the extent that you have people in their second year, which I understand first year interns, it's very uncommon, and maybe in some boards they don't allow, specialty boards, they may not allow any of those first years in order to do any moonlighting, and the physicians on the board can head nod if they agree with that. Good. So then we're dealing with still the second years who would not be helped by the 30-month suggestion that Dr. Ganadev has. We've talked out, and it's already in the language of the bill, which pertains to the leave policies. So I think the leave policy is something that is going to be addressed. Signing state forms, that's another matter. I think the bill language sufficiently speaks to that as well. There's this topic of inability of taking time to do research. I don't know enough about that, but that may be that. I think that might be mitigated in part by the 30-month proposal. But anyway, I think what we're talking about is making hopefully at least a substantial amount of headway with some of this. I hope that helps.
Can I just do a quick mic check? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So I guess, I agree with Dr. Kraus that perhaps we're not going to solve any of these other issues. And I guess I would invite us or encourage us to think about whether we support the bill with its current amendments, or whether we require additional changes to be made to the bill on this issue of PTL, whether we require some of these other issues to be solved, even if we don't have exactly the answers as of this point in time, but whether we require those to be solved before we would support the bill.
Well, again, I hate to keep talking on this one, but unless the necessary changes are made, it's tough for me to support, because I mean I was there when we had the hearing on the bill, and a lot of legislators pointed out the problem with this. So we do need to fix this training license issue. So I think they partially fixed it, but did not. And for me, as a trainer of hundreds of young people, I think it's putting them at a lot of risk, not able to work.
And
Thanks, Dr. Ganadev. Does anyone have a different position that we should have some of these other issues solved in order for our full support of this bill?
I don't feel we have to solve PTL to get to a supportive amended position tonight.
And and I'm sort of on the same vein. I mean, we were very fortunate. We have the calendar on our side for this one. This hasn't even left out of the Senate yet. There are multiple parts of this bill. I think everyone would like to see some changes or additions made to it. And so, my current position will be, support unless, or not support unless amended.
Okay, so what I'm hearing today is the board would like to see some changes, but we don't necessarily believe this needs to be resolved as part of our comments tonight for support unless amended. Okay. All right, I'd like to move on. There's just a couple of other issues I want to make sure we at least touch on. As I understand it, Mr. Bone, the bill in its current form does not include any of the items we identified in our sunset review report as it relates to the licensed midwives.
That's correct. There is no language in the bill that pertains to the licensed midwives, and the language of the report stated that the board agreed with an appropriate scope of practice and related statutory protections that LMs could be effectively regulated through a separate entity under DCA. So the board did not contemplate what that framework should look like, fee levels, board composition, scope of practice, all of that. So the board did not weigh in on those things when they approved the report. And I think the board essentially said, we think this could work. There is some work that needs to be done to flesh all that out. So that's how I would characterize, the board's position. So if, like with cost recovery, if the board continues to, support that viewpoint, that there is a pathway for LMs to have their own board, and the board maintains that position, Madam President, then that might be kind of a quick one for us to get through.
Right. So I guess I'd just like to reaffirm that, to the extent there is anyone who disagrees with that, just reaffirm the position that's in our sunset review report.
Agreed.
All right, that beats cost recovery for the easiest issue of the evening. The last issue I had on my list, and this is just one I identified, which is the current version of 806 includes a 2-year extension of the board versus the typical 4 years. My concern with that 2 years is that it doesn't allow us very much time to get anything done, particularly if we have an enforcement monitor that's going to issue a report and have some recommendations for us to potentially implement. It just doesn't give us what I view as a sufficient period of time to do some of the hard work that I think that the legislature and the public wants us to see before, frankly, we're back in this process. The sunset review process, I know that there are members of the board who have been through it before, but it is incredibly time consuming for our staff and for the board itself. And so I'm just concerned that we would be back here again in 2 years without, like I said, the time to do some of the hard work that I think is really important for the board to do. So that was why I wanted us to just have a quick conversation about whether we would want to advocate for the typical 4 years.
I agree.
Ms. Lawson, I think.
I agree.
Yeah, it is. It should be 4 years. 2 years doesn't make any sense, because by the time you really get some report from whatever this consultant monitor is, then you're already there for a game. So it makes no sense.
I'd like to ask Aaron the reason why it's a 2-year sunset. Senator Roth?
That's a great question, Dr. Lewis. I've asked that. I've not been able to receive clarity on that. I think it's fair to say that it's not a compliment. So 4 years is the norm. But I agree with the concerns of the board that doesn't really leave much time to measure any differences or improvements in outcomes, so to speak, and then also to pinpoint we did this and that led to that positive thing, so I think the board is right on with encouraging a 4-year sunset.
Good luck, Aaron.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone with a dissenting viewpoint there on that particular issue?
I just wanted to point out that there will be multiple more amendments.
Of course.
Legislature,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, are there any other issues? I mean, to that end, are there any other issues? Those are the ones I had on my list that were themes from public comment, from our previous discussions, from the analysis, but are there any other issues that I missed or that board members are interested in or want to have a conversation about before we try to craft a motion and a formal position in light of all of this? All right, I'm not hearing any. I mean, based on what I've heard, and we can go back through some of these topics, our position is that this would require amendments before we would be satisfied with it. And so far as I understand our choices, they would be oppose unless amended or support unless amended. And I guess, Aaron, as a matter of process, an opposed position would mean that we were also opposing the board continuing, right? Unless it was amended. And so I guess I want to talk through what those two options really mean practically or from the legislature or the governor's perspective as those bodies and the governor are looking at this bill as it advances through the process.
Yeah, oppose unless amended is really kind of a really tricky one with regard to a board that's facing sunset, right? I mean, if this was any other bill and we didn't have that kind of axe hanging over our head, so to speak, then oppose unless amended is a much easier thing to do. In this case, if the board adopted an oppose unless amended position to include the various items that you all discussed, and then the legislature declined to include all of those, then in essence we would be saying, okay, well, if those things don't occur, we will oppose the continuation of the board, which is not something that I would encourage the board to do. So does that help, Madam President?
I
think
prefer
so, but I'd
support.
like to make sure, does the board members have any questions about that or want to talk through that?
So as the last one who went through the sunset, we had a lot of issues with the previous bill too. So usually for this one, Aaron is correct. You want support if I'm amended. And we can state what our amendments are because it's our sunrise bill. Otherwise, there is no sunrise on the medical board. So it just, we can put any amendments we're asking for, but if they do, that's what our support is.
And just to add to that quickly is the board, if the board took a supportive amended position, the board in your next meeting, the August meeting, would have the opportunity to revise that and maybe who knows what will happen over the next 10 months or several months or several weeks from now. And if the board doesn't get doesn't receive everything that it asked for with the supportive amended position, well, the board can simply revise its position if it feels comfortable during the August meeting, like, hey, you know what? We feel like we're good, and we're just going to change the support. The board still has that option at that next board meeting.
Thanks, Mr. Bonin. Thanks, Dr. Gananadev, for the historical perspective too about the process. And so, I mean, I guess I'm looking for a motion to support if amended. And let me just go through the amendments that I have and then ask staff to help me if I miss anything from the conversation. One of the amendments I have is that that the legislature include a public member majority. We didn't agree on the specifics as to that, but it looked like there was consensus around having a rigorous vetting process for however it would be that the legislature arrived at that public member majority. The second amendment that I had was a restoration of the $1,150 license fee.
Can I clarify on that, Madam President? It would be both the initial licensure and the renewal fees at $1,150. I believe that was the board's
yes
original request, but so I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but
thank you for that, because I'm reading from what the amendments are and then trying to process in my mind what our amendments would be. So yes, whatever would restore our original request there.
And I guess maybe to another simpler way, perhaps even to do it, is just to revert back to the prior version of the bill as it pertains to just, we like the May 20 version of the fees in the bill.
I like it.
Okay.
Yep, I like it. Let's go with that. The third, we support the concept of an enforcement monitor, and I guess our comments would be, or potential amendments that would be required for our support would be to include the goals and a program that was developed and had certain requirements that would be in line with what was created through prior legislation, specifically the last bill that created the enforcement monitor.
Yeah, would it be helpful, Madam President, if the motion, and I'm going back to my analysis page, top of page 4, bottom of page 5, there's 5 bullets that are in there that are a summary of the 2002 bill. So if essentially we were attempting to, I don't know if mirror is the wrong word, but if we wanted to adopt the goals from the 2002 statute as the board's request for the parameters, and that might include the appointment, process as well for that individual.
And so my understanding from our previous discussion was that was supportable, or at least the consensus of the board was that was a good framework in total. And then I guess the last amendment, well, okay, 2 more amendments that would be required. One would be that there be some additional work on the postgraduate training licenses. We actually support, as far as I can tell, the current amendments that would solve for this, the leave issue, but we want some continued work done on the other issues that have been identified by the various stakeholders.
Yes, it's not clear to me though, once we get beyond expressing support for what is currently in the bill with regard to the PTL, beyond that I get a little fuzzy, Madam President, with regard to what those other steps might be, or what the board would be directing staff to do, because I think the key unresolved issue is moonlighting and the X waiver, and so far as we know, the solution to that resides with the timing with which an individual gets their full license.
Yes, you're correct on that. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe this is the one where I heard that the consensus was that we not request any further amendments at this time, and that we potentially, and I think Mr. Brooks said it best, let this one work its way through the process a little bit more before taking another position here, that we're going to solve this issue tonight. Am I recalling that correctly from our discussion?
Maybe, but I can tell you I can't support that but that's my personal opinions.
Okay. Thoughts from other board members?
Madam President, this is Dick Thorpe. So my only concern is I just want to make sure we leave a placeholder here so that there is room for further negotiation. I don't think we need to work it out tonight necessarily, but I do think it's important from my perspective as a member of the board, it's important that we actually do advocate for those young doctors that are trying to find a way, into the workforce so that we actually facilitate that and not be an obstacle to it. So I'm fine with saying, okay, we'll leave it in as an item for further negotiation. I don't know how we do that, Mr. Bone, but I would like to leave some kind of a way to further negotiate on it without actually coming up with the actual solution tonight.
And to that point, Madam President, we could simply, in our position letter, we could, express our appreciation and support for the current PTO language that's in the bill right now, and that the board, continues to want to resolve the remaining outstanding issues. But, and that kind of, period. We don't really have much else to say on that solution at this moment.
I agree.
I think that sounds right to me. That sound right to the board members?
Yes.
Okay, and then the last issue that I have was just that we would like to see an amendment such that we'd have 4 more years of the board to allow ourselves some sufficient time to do the work of or have the enforcement monitor that we support do its work.
Also the midwives.
Yeah. The midwives, though, I'm not sure, we didn't change our position, right? So I guess we'd like to see some amendments in line. And I guess, Aaron, that goes to this point, any other issues that were in our report, we continue to believe in those issues and aren't changing our positions.
Yes. And so, and staff, will continue to advocate for, everything that's in this report. Sleep with it some nights. No, I'm joking. But that's going to continue to be the staff's, North Star. And so that work continues on, but I think what the board, but instead what you all are doing tonight is clarifying what it's going to take for the legislature to earn the support position of the board.
Great. So, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Krause.
I'm not sure I trust the legislature to understand what a more vigorous vetting process is in terms of their appointments. Do you think we need to define that, or just keep that open for discussion?
I'm glad you mentioned that, Dr. Krause, because I was going to circle back to that. That what that might look like is not clear to me. Those processes are, largely they're subject to the appointing authorities, and so the board, when this board is appointing somebody to the MAC or some other position, the board exercises its own discretion. I do understand some of the comments that were raised that the process does look different, right? If you were a gubernatorial appointee versus a legislative appointee, the legislative appointees do not enjoy the Senate confirmation process. So I don't know what to do about that.
Does the legislature have the authority to request a rebalance of the governor's appointments to make it 6-7 instead of 7-6, or is that solely the governor's authority?
So the composition of the board is laid out in statutes. So if your question, Doctor, is, I think one of your comments was, one of the ideas was, well, let's, rather than add 2, let's take 1 and add 1, something like that. That would take an act of the legislature. That's not something, those positions.
But they could put it in the sunset.
Yeah.
So my suggestion would be to include in the sunset that the governor's appointments become six positions and 7 public members.
That would be a total of 13.
Which it is now.
Total is 15.
It's 15, Howard. Yeah.
No, the governor appoints 13.
Yes.
Oh, fair
So I'm saying to change the governor's appointments from 7 physicians, 6 public members to 7 public members, 6 physicians.
I don't.
I don't.
I'm trying to do the math.
I don't. That would be a perfectly fine and acceptable outcome to me. I guess I don't know whether those governor's appointments go through any more rigorous process, except for the fact that they have to go through Senate rules confirmation, right? But I have no insight into what the vetting process is or how extensive for the other types of members. And I guess I would invite their comment, but I'm not sure that the governor's process is necessarily better or more thorough than the Speaker of the Assembly, for example. And so I don't have a particular point of view as to whether one is better than the other. I think the public member majority I support, and I guess I'm not as focused on in what way that's accomplished.
Well, I'm still confused on the problem we're trying to solve. The legislature's had appointees, throughout, time, right? This is not new. If we've had some problems with those appointees that I don't know about in the past, then let's solve that problem. But if we haven't, we're creating a solution in search of a problem. So I'm not quite sure what the background in having this discussion is.
Well, I don't know that we need to increase the size of our board from 15 members to 17 members. 15 is adequate. We're just looking for a public member majority. So the simple solution, given that the governor holds 13 of the 15 appointments, would just be to rebalance the governor's appointments.
I mean, that's a fair outcome, but I guess I would ask the question, do we oppose the creation of a public member majority of 17? Or we just prefer 15?
Well, again, it comes to cost. Why do we need a bigger board?
Madam Chair, it's not only, it is cost, but it's not just cost. It's also, we, structurally over the years of serving on multiple boards, larger boards are not necessarily more effective. And you may say, well, 2 more is not that much different. 17, not much different than 15, but it certainly does have cost. I would think just in the course of process, it would be better to have a smaller board than to have a larger board. I mean, to not increase the size of the board, I'm saying. I'm not talking about, I'm not saying that I would oppose the rebalancing to have a public majority. I'm just saying it seems to me that it would be more appropriate to do it in the way that Howard is talking about than to do it with just by having 2 more members willy-nilly, I guess.
And the advantage of changing the governor's balance is that all of those people go through a Senate confirmation process. We can't tell the Assembly and the Senate that all of a sudden their new appointees should go through a confirmation process.
That is a difficult message to deliver, Dr. Kraus. So, Madam President, if the board is able to achieve consensus around the idea of just having a public member majority, which is momentous in and of itself, then but cannot agree on some of the other ancillary details, then that may just be sufficient, right? And the legislature and the governor's office, they will work those details out, and it may be sufficient if that's the only point of consensus that the board can achieve, is just say, hey, we think a public member majority makes sense, period.
And then to add to Dr. Kraus's position, there's unintended consequences of switching the balance, because now you'd have to look at where every board member is currently in their tenure and wait for someone to drop off, than to appoint someone else, then a public member. And there's a little math that has to be done, and you could have some vacancies for years based on where everyone is in their terms.
Thoughts on Mr. Bone's proposal that we reach a consensus on the public member majority? I don't know. I guess there's not an easy way for me to.
I agree.
I like Mr. Bone's suggestion.
Yeah, I'm the Lone Ranger on this one. I don't think any other healthcare board has that. So, including pharmacy board where Mr. Brent came from. So I'm not. I think it's just division. I think it will give something to look at, but I don't think it's going to change anything on the board. So. Any other dissenters?
As I said earlier, I would be voting against that. I mean, I was talking when I was talking about Dr. Krause's idea. I think that idea is a good idea, but I'm not in favor of just increasing the board to 17 with 2 more public members.
Okay, I am
too.
Okay.
I also agree with Dr. Thorpe.
So, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing here from the members now is a reversal. Is, you know, we wanted very specific around, you know, just changing that to the limit should be 15. So here's an interesting deal. While we're doing this, because I didn't have this, if you go through the records of the board and the board composition for the last 8 years, right? And I'm looking at who has appointed the public members, and always all the doctor members would be appointed by the governor, but not all the public member appointees were not appointed. That always left a kind of a weighted outweighing of that, even though the Senate and the Assembly has voted or has placed those members. So if we say we want to just do the 15 members and have the public be the majority, if the governor decides it's not going to fill that positions, as has been a trend completely, then we would be in the same position. In this situation, you take, even though the board is bigger, and I don't think the expense is that much that it warrants this for the principle and the ton of credibility that we want to achieve. If we move it to 17 to achieve a public majority and we spend 30 grand more a year, that's not a big deal for the trust that we will get. But in that, if we allow the Senate and Assembly to appoint a member each, then it gives it more latitude to fill out those public member positions. That is the deal. Also, as everybody was talking about, there's actually rules for public members in the Business and Professions Code. Kerry could probably help me, where they're talking about, you know, our conflict of interest, all of the public members' requirements and all the criteria that we have to fulfill. And yet there are not such requirements for doctors. So even by the law, by the statute, we are required as public members to toe a certain line. And I think on the whole, the process waits itself out. And I don't have that book here now, but you know, someone can correct me. So I think that having a conversation about or disagreement about 15 versus 17, when we agree on the principle of a public majority, that's the vote, that's the consensus. You either are not in favor of a public majority or you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. And I think that's where Mr. Bone was headed with his previous comments as well. But it sounds like us moving to that position has now 2 or 3 of our members not supporting a public member majority. I did have, by my count previously, that a majority of us supported the public member majority without any other conditions on that support for this evening, but I need to test that again before we, I guess, move on. And I mean, I don't know if we can go back through our positions, or if we need to take a separate vote on this one specific issue. Maybe Carrie, you could help with some direction here.
No, I think Mr. Bone's suggestion is good.
Okay. And so I guess we've lost the support of a couple members.
Can we restate that? Now, with so many conversations, I'm confused.
The question is, do you support a public member majority or not?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And it looks like, yeah.
Just simply putting the question, and then leaving the rest of the details to the legislature and the governor to work through, and the board's just simply expressing we as a part of a supportive amended position on this topic, it would be to institute a public member majority.
Okay, but we still can support, if amended, just this piece we carve out for further discussion.
No, we're not carving it out for further discussion. It's part of our list of suggested amendments at this point. It's just that our position is not going any farther than supporting a public member majority, which is not currently included in the legislation. Okay. We're not going so far as to provide any more details as to our position or to express a particular desire as to the composition. It's just the support of the public member majority.
Okay, thank you.
That's it, leaving it up to the legislature for the details. So do we have, I guess I heard a dissenting viewpoint from Dr. Gananadev. I heard a dissenting viewpoint on that issue from Dr. Thorpe, and I heard a dissenting viewpoint from Dr. Lewis. But I believe that there is still a majority of the board that's in favor of including that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that would be included in our list of amendments. And so I guess, I don't know, Aaron or Carrie, if you want to run back through what we just ran through as our positions, and then I will need a motion to support SB 806 unless amended in a second.
Yeah, I'm happy to, I guess, suggest the wording of the supportive amended position, and then of course subject to a member making such a motion and then a second. That the board adopt a supportive amended position to as follows, to request a public member majority, to revert back to the fees included in the May 20 version of the bill, to sorry, bear with me, model the enforcement program, to model the enforcement monitor after the SB 1950 bill of the year 2002, and to have a 4-year rather than a 2-year sunset extension. I think that is it.
What about the midwives?
Yeah, midwives.
Well,
there was no change in our position on the midwife.
Okay.
Remains our position. Yeah, and there's no language in the bill for us to comment on specifically. It's just an absence of what our prior request in our sunset review report is. So I don't think we need a change there or a new position.
So move.
Second.
Third.
Sorry, Kraus and then Yip as the motion in the second.
Is that right? I didn't catch it. I'm sorry.
That's
Yes.
what my recollection is. Okay.
Great. And so Carrie, can we just move to the roll call vote now?
Perhaps Ms. Caldwell.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm going to ask for Carrie.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm not asking Carrie to do the roll call vote. I'm just making sure that the process is correct.
Yes, that's fine.
Great. Ms. Caldwell, if you could please call the roll. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks.
Yes. Aye.
Ms. Campoverde.
Aye.
Dr. Gonadev,
Abstain.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Dr. Kraus,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Dr. Lewis,
Yeah, aye.
Ms. Lubiano,
Yes.
Dr. Mahmood is not here. Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Thorpe,
Yeah, yes.
Mr. Watkins,
Aye.
Dr. Yip.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, the motion carries for the board to take a support if amended position on SB 806. And with that, our final agenda item is item 4, adjournment. I would like to thank all of you for hanging in here for the past 3.5 hours as we discussed this important legislation. A particular thank you to all of our staff who are doing just a tremendous amount of hard work behind the scenes on our collective behalf, and to make sure that we've got a board that can continue to function well and into the future. So there being no further business this evening, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good job, Christina. Thanks for helping us get through this.
Thanks.